Kerala is an amalgam of different cultures. High human resource capacity and world-class living standards make the state an emerging knowledge hub. Future belongs to Kerala. Kerala perfected its entrepreneurial roadmap with a startup policy, which was a first by an Indian state. Kerala Startup Mission took the center stage as nodal agency. Government support poured in for budding ventures with funding and market connect. The state now serves as a template for governments across geographies. Thus, Kerala became home to one of the most vibrant startup ecosystems in the world.
We started Gen Robotics from the college itself through the Kerala Startup Mission IDC cell. And when we came to Kerala Startup Mission through the IDC cell, we only had an idea. Now the company Gen Robotics is spanned across throughout India, and also we are in a verge of sending our solutions globally.
Kerala has a sophisticated and inclusive startup ecosystem. Sophisticated in terms of the funding, skilling, facilities, and other capabilities it offers to the startups. And these capabilities have gotten it ranked as one among the top states in our country.
Kerala draws students towards innovation and entrepreneurship right from school and college levels. Kerala Startup Mission organizes IEDC Summit to inspire students and welcome them to the startup ecosystem.
Kerala Startup Mission organizes Singularity Global Impact Challenge and CIID for the global exposure for the startups.
Across the state, Kerala Startup Mission has 280 mini incubators and 40 plus incubation facilities.
The TimeEd and the Kerala Startup Mission rolled out an excellent ecosystem for product development and clinical research. Everything had a smooth sail, so much so that I received 2 crore investment from Unicorn India Ventures.
Kerala Startup Mission also educates, providing better accelerator support, 24/7 plug-and-play desk and cabin space, business service office, cloud credits, and development tools to startups.
It has become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity, said Albert Einstein. Blockchain technology is such a groundbreaking development in the field of technology that it becomes almost impossible to not be thrilled to deep dive into it. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Blockchain Summit of 2022, India's largest city-hosted blockchain festival. The Kerala Blockchain Summit aims to cover the latest innovations, technological topics, and business applications of blockchain. This is an amazing opportunity to get an idea about everything from cryptocurrencies to adoption of public and private blockchains if you're a curious soul venturing into the universe of blockchain and its applications. The second half of the day will witness Tech Talk on Startup Ramp program by AWS, Public Sector, and Green Innovation Fund Demo Day. There is also an opportunity to listen to global industry leaders, technical experts, startups, and policymakers. And the best part is that everybody can take part in this blockchain enthusiasts all over Kerala. Kerala has had several success stories in blockchain and an increasing base of talent and startups in the space. The summit intends to both educate and encourage the various stakeholders. The conference will cover keynote addresses, panel discussions, and Startup Innovation Challenge. We are excited to have you with us today to attend the summit and pick up new insights on everything from cryptocurrencies to the widespread adoption of public and private blockchains. So without further ado, let me invite Mr. Vasant Varada, Assistant General Manager, Customer Relationship Technopark, to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, Mr. Vasant.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Aishwarya. A very good morning to all of you. today's blockchain summit. Today's blockchain summit is organized jointly by Kerala IT Parks and Kerala Startup Mission with the support of Kerala Blockchain Academy. And on behalf of Kerala IT Parks and Kerala Startup Mission, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed speakers of the day who took out their valuable time to join the summit by accepting our invitation. And also not the least, I welcome all the participants who have joined the summit. I can assure you that we will have the best takeaways of the summit, and we have scheduled quite an informative and thought-provoking sessions through keynote addresses and tech talks. There are a lot more in store for the day, so I'm sure like we all would be excited in the coming hours. Getting to my role for the day, I would now like to welcome and introduce our marquee speakers one by one. The first keynote address is on blockchain, the truth machine, which will be delivered by Mr. Prasanna Lohar, Vice President, Technology at DCB Bank. So just a few points with regards to Prasanna Lohar. He heads the Innovation and Technical Architect at DCB Bank. He's part of the digital transformation of the bank, and he's closely associated with the new and latest technology, innovative in customer servicing and engagement. And he's into fintech and startup alignment, and also does the collaboration with other banks on blockchain initiatives. Prior to this role at DCB itself, he was instrumental in various deliverables like India's first Aadhaar and biometric enabled ATM, straight through fixed deposit account opening, a product known as SIPI, and various other initiatives. And I would welcome you, sir, for the towards the blockchain summit today, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. And coming to the next speaker, in the sense like it goes with a tech talk, which is handled both by Mr. Harsh Rajat and with his colleague Saraya Afsar. They both are from Ethereum push notification services. And Mr. Rajat, Harsh Rajat, is the founder of Ethereum push notification service. He's to say a bit on Rajat, he's having around 11 years of entrepreneurial experience, and he has touched his hand in different tech fields, mainly into mobile, web services, SaaS, and blockchain. And his entrepreneur journey, as what he says, he started way back in 2019 with the mobile apps and games. And he debuted with 360 web browser, which went on to become the first 10 app in the US App Store. And later on, he moved into the app marketing and consulting. And in 2016, he has further moved from his mobile space, and he wanted to get into some of the other fields which excited him, such as he was into viral content aggregator website and e-commerce price aggregator. And finally, he has landed up in 2018 with a passion in blockchain sector. As we all know, like blockchain is a distributed digital database, which is having a decentralized nature to it. So he wanted to come up with something which is there on the decentralization notification protocol, and that has led to the invention of the company like Ethereum push notification service. And that is his journey so far, what he says. And we are so curious to hear about his journey and what led to the invention of Ethereum push notification services in his upcoming session. Thank you and welcome to both Mr. Harsh Rajat and Mr. Saraya Afsar, who is the colleague of Harsh, and welcome you both, sirs, to this blockchain summit, and look forward to your session. Next keynote address is on the blockchain for the social good. So it is delivered by Mr. Arun Maharaja. And about Mr. Arun Maharajan, he is the blockchain lead. He is into Unicef Innovation Fund. He is with 15 years of diverse experience, and he calls him as the systems engineer, software developer, technical leader, entrepreneur, management consultant, business developer, and more. He loved to call himself as a product guy. He's very passionate to step into the field of blockchain, because as he says, blockchain has a lot of things in store for all of us in the future. So I would extend our warm welcome to you, sir, for this towards this blockchain summit, and we'll look forward to hear from you in the upcoming sessions. Next keynote session is from is on the Power Talk Web 3.0 and Indian startup ecosystem. It is led by Mr. Ajit Khurana. He is currently the founder of Stealth Mode Crypto startup firm, and he is an author. He is an entrepreneur. He is a prolific angel investor, and he has been the former CEO of SEPPE. We all know, like, SEPPE is the secure trading platform for this Bitcoin and cryptos. And about Ajit Khurana, he is a renowned figure in the cryptocurrency world, and he was former heading the blockchain and cryptocurrency committee, which was part of Internet and Mobile Association of India, which is the India's foremost industry body for cryptocurrency. And he also has played a formidable role as former CEO of the business incubator SENI at IIT Bombay. SENI stands for the Society for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. That's an umbrella organization which foster entrepreneurship and tech startups. And he has also been an advisor to Kalari Capital, which is again a venture capital firm, which was founded in 2006 in Bangalore. They invest predominantly in the areas of IT, clean technology startups, sectors, healthcare, etc. So, and he has also raised venture capital, and he has been into low-cost customer acquisition strategies. He's a wizard at financial engineering. His constant endeavor is into creating awareness in the digital assets and advising top token issuers. It's indeed an honor to have you, sir, for this session. I would welcome you on behalf of Kerala ID Parks and Startup Mission for the session, and would like to and curious to look up to your session to know your thoughts. The next speaker is Mr. Jijo Joseph. He will be handling the tech talk, and that will be based on the enterprise blockchain adoption guiding principles. And with about Mr. Jijo Joseph, he is Vice President, Chainyard Blockchain Services, and he's a global senior IT executive who holds around over 25 years of delivering growth in information technology services across US, India, and Middle East market with hands-on technical experience. Adept at heading operations, he's into re-engineering to improve efficiency platforms. He's a seasoned leader and nurturing innovation, and he's member to many company boards. He's an active speaker. He's into leadership roles in various industry forms such as Confederation of Indian Industries and NASSCOM. On behalf of Kerala IT and Kerala Startup Mission, I welcome you, sir, to the Blockchain Summit. I look forward to hear you. Now, not the least, actually, I would again like to invite all our guest participants, dignitaries who has attended the blockchain summit. And now, with regards to our Kerala IT Parks and Kerala Startup Mission, with regards to the organizing team, as we all know, like Kerala IT Parks is into consists of Technopark, Infopark, and Cyberpark. We are IT infrastructure providers and facilitators, and we are home to 900 companies, 1.25 lakhs of direct employment we give, and we are spread across 1,000 acres of campuses. We are in Technopark in Trivandrum, Infopark in Kochi, and Cyberpark in Calicut. And we also have satellite centers we have Technopark in Kollam, then Infopark in Alapi, that's in Cherthala, and Infopark also has a satellite center in Thrissur, which is in Koratti, and we obviously have the hub center in Calicut. So now coming to Kerala Startup Mission, we all know like Kerala Startup Mission is a global agency and helps startups to connect with the startup ecosystem, investors, various stakeholders, corporate, and the industry as such. And with regards to the recent one of the article you might have gone through, like the Forbes has come up with the latest blockchain 50 for 50 companies of 2022. I would like to draw your attention in the sense like out of the 50 companies, 2 of our major corporates has featured in the list, that is of Alliance and Oracle. And Alliance, as you know, like they have come up with they are the insurance giant, and they have come up in streamlining the cross-border auto insurance claims in Europe. And with the blockchain pitching in, they could completely streamline their different teams who've been working at different time zones and with incompatible databases, which was taking too much of a time for them to process the insurance claims and things like that. And they have reduced their processing time quite a lot through that, and through the implementation of blockchain. And what they have told is that this has further reduced the cost by 10%. That is what the Forbes itself says. And when coming to the Oracle, in the sense like it is estimated by 2030, around 40% of the vehicles in the market would be converted to electric vehicles. And in electric vehicles, as you know, like the raw material which gets into the battery is mainly of the cobalt. And with regards to the cobalt, actually, the 2/3 of the cobalt mining happens in Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a war-torn country. And Oracle, for this instance, they have collaborated with one of the British startup known as Circular, who is a raw material tracking company. And they have built a blockchain-enabled platform to trace the origin of this such raw materials such as cobalt. And it is curious to again note the world's largest EV manufacturers like the Mercedes-Benz, Volvo, the Polestar, etc. have already got signed up for this service with Oracle's blockchain. This why I highlighted is that so these are some of the major corporates which work in Kerala IT landscape, and we look forward. There are a lot of other emerging companies are also there, and there are other corporates also are working and getting into the blockchain space. So it is quite a great future which we are looking at as far as Kerala IT landscape is concerned with regards to the blockchain and streamlining the daily operations, which will in turn reduce the operational cost to a greater extent. So even the FOB itself says like it will unleash untold efficiency. That is what the FOB says through the implementation of blockchain. So once again, I would like to welcome one and all, and I wish all of you a great learning experience in this the blockchain summit in the hours to come. So thank you so much for being a part of part of this blockchain summit and to take out time and to get into the summit. We look forward to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vasant, for that indeed warm welcome to each and every expert that we have today. Thank you so much for joining us. Now it's time to move on to the keynote address titled Blockchain, the Truth Machine. So we have Mr. Prasanna Lohar, Vice President Technology, DCB Bank with us today. So Mr. Prasanna Lohar, who currently serves as the Innovation Head and Technical Architect at DCB Bank, as part of DCB's digital transformation, he is closely associated with new and latest technology, assimilation, experimentation, innovation, customer servicing and engagement, robust architecture, implementation, fintech and startup alignment, open innovation practices, and collaboration with other banks on blockchain initiatives. Prior to this role at DCB, he was a digital bank head and was a part of various deliveries like India's first Aadhaar and biometric-enabled ATM, straight-through fixed deposit account opening product Zippy, India's first omni-channel framework for bank, mobile banking apps, internet banking initiative, UPI, Bharat Bill payment, API management, switch and cards relevant initiatives. So it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Prasanna Lohar. Over to you, Mr. Prasanna.
Yeah, so very good morning, Aishwarya, and very good morning to Kerala Startup Mission family, Kerala Blockchain Academy, and Technopark, right? I think it's great to be here at early morning. I'm a big fan of Kerala Blockchain Academy, the way they drive blockchain adoption locally, globally. And I think they were one of those pioneers to bring a blockchain education in India. So let's talk about the truth machine, right? Rise of a blockchain for a better society. This is what I am going to talk about. If you see the overall journey of a human race, right? So at least last 400, 500 years, it has been impacted because of industry revolution. Industry Revolution 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. And if you look at these slides, if you will see there was a gap of at least 200 years between Industry Revolution 1 and 2 and Industry Revolution 3. But Industry Revolution 4, which is our current era, which is around internet, electronics, chips, maybe slowly we'll get into 5G or blockchain kind of ecosystem we are talking about, right? So every industrial revolution has given some kind of impact to the human transformation, right? If you talk about the 18th century, it was all around the mechanical thing, right? That is why we have seen rise of printing press and so many other things. 2.0 was quite phenomenal, wherein we have seen supply chains and assembly lines, electrical revolution it is called about. So wherein we have seen a lot of mechanical robots, cobots kind of things were happening. So I think Industry 3.0 was quite interesting, where we have seen a rise of internet in 1995, at least in India. And today we can't imagine any of our life without any of those electronic chips or any of those PCs, any of those devices. And now when we are in Industry 4.0, we will see that compared to 1, 2, and 3, Industry 4.0 talks a lot about entirety. It talks about sharing economy. It talks about everything all about around us. It talks about how do we really utilize networks, sensors, and so on. So maybe although we are in part of Industry 4.0, and although we have been seeing that overall journey of internet adoption, still there are a lot of gaps. Rather gaps, I can say that these gaps are created by humans itself. right? Say example, having a MasterCard Visa in between while you transaction between banks, or you talk about this within a share economies, you have one of the central authority, so-called Ubers and Ola, some of the examples out there. We have created governance, governments, and controllers, right? So while gone were those days, people used to directly do the transaction to each other and so on. So I think Industry 4.0 is a boon, but there are still some gaps, and we need to see how do we identify these gaps immediately and solve them, right? So that's all about. So overall adoption of internet, it took almost 50-60 years, right? Since ARPANET has become TCP/IP, and then slowly we have seen lot of adoption by or a rise of HPs, Apples, Googles, right? Facebook has come in year 2004-5, right? And since then, last 16-20 years, recently they rebranded them as a Meta. So it took 15 years to come out of the one shell and getting into another zone, right? So that's the whole thing, how we have seen internet, the way we use it on the mobile phones or browsers. And slowly, while we move within internet, there are different areas. Internet 1 and 2, which we have seen commonly in last 20-25 years. And now slowly we are getting into internet 3.0, which is all about user behavior, smart applications, user engagement, right? Something like a behavioral within how do we operate in a virtual environment. So I think your monolithic two-dimensional view is slowly becoming three-dimensional, and while we go there, we require more and more trust kind of a thing, right? So that's how we have seen. If you look at these logos like the Kodaks, AOLs, Nokias, I think these are the logos where my generation has used these services back in early 2000, first email, right? Or you talk about first website in India, bazi.com, so or hotmail.com, which was created by one of those Indian originator. Now these logos were the best logos that moment. You talk about Kodak, AOL, Nokia, people never thought they will live without them. That is a part of the internet story, right? If you see these STD PC booth where we people used to have a queue to call to your parents or your relatives after 7 o'clock, after 8:30, because there were different dimensions of our call rates. This was the era which we have lived, and these logos vanished. The challenge with these logos is that they didn't hurt customer, how the technology is coming and taking away the customers, right? Now look at these logos. Google, Amazon, everybody knows we can't live without them, right? And most of the customers in the world, right? Say example, we are almost 8 billion. Most of the people, at least 75-80% people are the customers of all these four giants. Netflix is a new economy, right? Or you can see Jio, which has done a lot of digital movement in India. We can't live without WhatsApp. If I ask some of you guys also, please stop utilizing WhatsApp from today. You may do it, right? For a second or for a half an hour, but it is all the necessity now. Right, so this is how we have created our internet, and now we cannot go away from the internet. But while we do this, right, and these logos has really heard how consumer is really looking at. But now consumer is really changing heavily since last couple of years, right? Now, while we are in internet 2.0, slowly we'll get into Internet of Things, your smart cars, smart homes, right? And moreover, your every ecosystem will need some kind of intelligence and trust. What we have seen in the cloud or on social media, a lot of fraud does happen, right? On mobile, lot of frauds happen, a lot of issues are there in the current ecosystem. And these issues are created by us because these ecosystems are created centrally by us. Right? I think it's a chance for us when we are entering or while we are in the part of a 3.0, how can we utilize many more other technology to bring a smart behavior or some kind of a better experience for the customers. So primarily when you talk about blockchain is not the only thing which will come and say solve all of our problems around trust, right? So blockchain has to cohesively work with many other ecosystems. If I divide this overall ecosystem into 3 brackets, the first bracket, which is a customer channel, which is all around your interfaces, mobile interface, we talk about wearables, IoTs tomorrow, or immersive interface like augmented reality tomorrow, metaverse, the one we should talk about, right? These interfaces has to talk to the backend systems, backend databases, backend AI, backend big data. And that backend communication will happen either through form of an API in centralized world and a form of a smart contracts in decentralized worlds. So in a nutshell, while we talk a lot about blockchain, it's not only blockchain going to solve our problem. It has to cohesively work with the overall ecosystem. And that point in time, truth of blockchain comes more real, right? For example, is it scalable? It says it is secure, but is it really secure? It says that it can be scalable as well as it is a immutable, irreversible. So many things we keep on hearing, but when it will work cohesively with the other ecosystem, that moment we'll need key. Yes, we have to do so many things. Look at the internet, ARPANET, TCP/IP, web, www, first website, and since then now we are after 40, 50 years, still we find out the gaps. So blockchain is a new technology, is a foundational technology. It is not like some kind of a disruptive technology like Android or iOS writes on internet. It does writes on internet, but it's a completely foundational technology, and it will change the way we operate, the way we talk, the way we transport, the way we do financial transactions, the way we ask for services from the government, healthcare, and so on. But cohesively, it has to work with the many other technologies. That's how you'll see the blockchain adoption so far, right? So since Bitcoin transaction, right, has happened after 2008 mishap of the banking ecosystem. So why blockchain came into our life with some agenda, say example, Bitcoin, we call it as a trust protocol, right, has come and say we will revise or revamp the complete banking. 2007, Lehman Brothers was one of the bank was heavily told that it's a very profitable bank, billions of profits, and within 1 year it has gone down. Why? Because this overall banking system was corrupted, was not really taken care properly, and still we are suffering the same kind of issues today also. Today, Government of India talks about digital rupee, or there are many more things we have developed so far like IMPS, RuPay, or UPI, Aadhaar. We have to utilize those railroads and see how we'll have a better trustworthy journey. And blockchain comes, yeah, I will come and be part of that journey. While we move this journey from 2009 to 2022, still we have to do a lot of improvements around layer 2 consensus mechanism, considering security, data privacy. How do we store the data? We have a lot of mechanisms like IPFS and so on, but we need to see how are we really moving ahead. These days we talk a lot about DeFi's, NFTs. There are many more other things are coming in our life, but we need to really see a lot of improvements in the current blockchain ecosystem given by Ethereum and so many other layer 2 protocols coming in form of Polygon, Solana, and so on. So that's the truth about, although concept is good, although we are in a right architecture, ask me how many banks have implemented blockchain on an enterprise scale. Hardly anybody. There are a lot of tries are happening, but technology is not the only essence, like who will solve. There are other areas which are going to solve to resolve this. So when we look at any foundational technology, for example, internet or blockchain, there are 4 areas we need to look at. How the overall evolution is happening. The email was the first use case, right, for ARPANET followed by internet. Similarly, Bitcoin could be the first use case of a blockchain. So that's how we have to look at, right? So if you really look at the last 40 years of journey for internet, or last 10-year journey of a blockchain, still there is a lot to do on a blockchain side. There is a lot to do on blockchain side. You have to divide this whole overall journey into 4 areas. So we had to transform so many things. The way communication is transformed by WhatsApp, Skype, and so on. We are had to do so many things around self-executing smart contracts. So that is a reality. Although we talk heavily around blockchain, we need to work upon these many areas, people and skill. I think great to see how KBA drives the blockchain adoption. We need much adoption of blockchain, the way we learned our computer engineering with the databases, computer networks, and so many other subjects. We need blockchain stream also out there, so that we have many engineers coming out and do a lot of research to make the technology more mature. Right? Although other areas like architecture and interoperability is much more global need, where we have hyperledgers. There are a lot of projects are going like hyperledger, Cactus, and so on. R3 is working on that. Interoperability is a major challenge. How do we fit the current blockchain into the existing architecture easily? Can we not have another operating system of a blockchain which comes and plug and play to the existing legacy system or any of the digital first system? That's how we need to look at, right? Current Web 2 applications are there. They have a DevOps practices, they have a rapid application development practices, they have all these practices which will create the zero trust, better application, but still there are a lot of challenges. So while we have a better concept like blockchain being there, we need to work upon people skills. India is one of those top into ICT, right? So we have given a lot of engineers to the world. This is a time to create many more such a skill set. Regulation compliance is another need, right? We keep on hearing crypto regulations. We keep on hearing government is doing something like that. But at the same time, Look at how government is putting efforts on a national strategy of a blockchain. Recently, it was the second version was released. It has spoken about the awareness, what all use cases will come. People talk very less about those use cases. Why? People heavily talk only around cryptocurrencies or some of those blockchain 1.0 kind of era, where I'm not sure what type of a use case will be there for normal Indians. Somebody is roaming around as SME, MSME. What all use case you will provide through cryptocurrencies, right? Technology is good, but the way it is happening, we need to really look at how compliance and the regulation will shape up, and we'll have a many more transformational use cases with the help of a blockchain. So these 4 areas really need to be taken care of while we say there is a lot of potential around blockchain technology. So friends, last 20 years or before 20 years, we have always seen some force came in our life, like Android or iOS or internet. So this is the right time to collaborate, innovate together, so that we could see some kind of a use cases the way we have seen Aadhaar. Can you not take Aadhaar into the blockchain to bring a better consent mechanism? Or when I talk about, can we not create a decentralized KYC where current KYC to bank A has to be utilized again and again? It takes 7,000 rupees to create one KYC to one bank. Again, 7,000 rupees to be taken care by that bank. Likewise, there are many more other challenges, regulations, settlements. You talk about reconciliation, man in middle, intermediaries who are asking so much of fees to all these banks. It's very, very important time to innovate and collaborate and utilize the blockchain kind of technology so that our life should be more and more trustworthy and more better. Because when we land up in a 5G kind of era, or when we land sharing economy kind of era, today we might be having Ola, Uber, Swiggy, Zomato, co-working spaces, likewise very hardly numbers, right? Tomorrow, this number will go into hundreds, 200, 300, 400. World Economic Forum says there will be more than 350 entities who will operate on a marketplaces. And when we'll operate on marketplaces, certainly we will need that kind of a trust between, or that kind of a smart micro transactions between all those actors. Tomorrow, your IoT gadgets, we will wanna become customers. They will do the financial transaction on their own. They will give the sensors, or they will give the messages to the stakeholder, all the stakeholders. How it will happen immediately. That is why it's very, very important. While we have seen a cloud or a computing, how do we enter in a quantum and edge computing with a better trust? That's how we need to come together, collaborate, and utilize blockchain technology very heavily. So where we have challenges around these intermediaries, the one which we have created as a part of a Web 2.0. We have challenges around hackers, right? The way we have designed our ecosystem, the way we have this front tier or presentation tier, middleware, backend server, and it is all error prone. It is all hack prone. Like it is not that secure the way we see, right? Anybody can go if they have access in database. Anybody can time any middleware. There are a lot of attacks like SQL exceptions, and there are so many attacks can happen unless you take care of all those peripheral ecosystems like firewall, web application firewall, IP whitelisting, and whatnot, right? Data integrity across ecosystem. Today, these days, banks, fintechs are collaborating. I don't know the data which is which fintech has is the same data which I have. How do I trust that? How can I create a self-sovereign identity? There is a monopoly of these Googles, and I don't know for how many years this monopoly is going to be there, right? Can I not see some kind of another ecosystem coming in and taking care of the customers rather than utilizing the data of the customers? While we see how these challenges are there, 17 sustainable goals is another challenge or a KRA for every country to meet, which is led by UN in 2015. We need to see how some of them can be made by the technologies. Zero hunger, zero poor, better health. After pandemic, everybody is taking care of health. How do you have a better water? Today, we are buying water. 30 years before, we never bought a water distillery. So I think that's why we need to see how on an environment side, humanity side, technology side, we have to create a sustainable ecosystem after 2030 also. Industry 4.0 is here, but how cohesively we can utilize and do these use cases is very, very important. So these are our challenges so far, and these challenges certainly we can meet with the help of blockchain. The challenges could be around having those, not having those digital identities or not having those accounts for many customers. How do we safeguard our social media for ongoing frauds? How do we safeguard against this fraudulent digital identity document? People create n number of documents and create so many accounts, ask for the loans. We have those use cases like Nirav Modi's and so on, right? So this was created. People put this billboard, right? Private property belongs to me. Why do we need that? Can't we live with the trust? A lot of time happens for doing this land registration kind of for buying, selling properties, from where my food is coming. If a accident happens, the claiming insurance is a very tedious process, a lot of manual process out there, right? So peer-to-peer payments, heavy duty fees on the internet, you will never feel that you are safe altogether. We have seen these Twitter frauds, or I was talking about this share economy coming will require trust, right? Or these days we receive a lot of these fraudulent SMSs placed. I think last year we have gone live with a blockchain-based system for telecoms. So at least we will see reduce this kind of a fraudulent SMSs. OTP frauds. So everywhere there is a need of a mutual trust. Customer needing a trust from government, banks, and all those controllers, as well as controllers. Our governments are looking, is it really right customer? Is it the right one, right? Is there any challenge on digitality? So the problem is on the both sides. That is what blockchain comes and says that I will resolve all of these needs, right? So, say example, banks also have those needs. So there are a lot of needs like having a better asset where a customer should not be NPA, or security reporting. You talk about how do we take care of a customer, right? Onboarding should be cohesive enough. Can you not have a decentralized onboarding? So like world is facing challenges, banks are also facing challenges. So there comes blockchain and says, I will improve productivity. I will allow a radically simplified collaboration, and I will reduce the chain of the intermediaries. I'm not saying it will remove altogether. We need intermediaries for better governance regulation. It will take a lot of time to go into that. World has to come down again, have to rebirth. Then only we can say that intermediaries will vanish. But look at the whole area. Governments are required, compliance are required. How do we increase the trust between the participants, and the security between participants is very, very important. Blockchain gives that attention. Yes, I am there. Please evolve around me. Please make me more mature, and let's grow together, right? We have seen these stories of Bitcoin since last 10 years. We have been seeing so many 70,000 plus cryptocurrencies. I don't know for what purpose we need. There are 100 plus banks. We know for what purpose we need them, right? We tried with a stable coin, which was one of the great innovation, but it has also gone down. Like while we are entering this era of NFTs, where data theft, data security on the web can be really taken care of with the help of NFTs in future. DeFi, which will give a lot of a better banking, it can be regulated in better way to create more better banking. Metaverse, and all of these are new waves. And at the same time, BIS, Banking International Settlement, having some care to build kind of a better mechanism of banking to reduce costs, reduce reconciliation, right? It takes some transaction happens on the one POS. It takes 1 or 2 days to get a actual money for that POS vendor or merchant. For a UPI, for a customer, it may be immediate transaction, but in the back end, so many services. Banks have invested millions, billions of rupees to handle man in middle or intermediaries. This is the right time. We have to create a digital rupee kind of a ecosystem slowly, cohesively, with a better monetary policies, better architecture. People say we may not require blockchain, but whenever we require transparency, we need to really look at how blockchain can be utilized while we adopt in digital rupee. We are sitting on a railroads like UPI, Aadhaar. We have to utilize them, PCR, and so many things, right? So while we are on this journey, better to understand what type of use cases will come on a blockchain, right? Every use case, right, which will have manual paperwork, too much of money, manual reporting, this kind of where we need transparency. So all these things, areas like where trust, time, manual processing, authentication, data security, intermediary, go for blockchain. Don't wait, because your competition of your organization is with you. Say example, your organization A adopting blockchain and not adopting blockchain. Certainly you will have a greater edge, you will have a better prosperity with a technology like blockchain. You may say, what all those use cases? So use this framework and look at how we can really move further. There are examples like Estonia or Dubai, right? They have converted most of their government use cases. Estonia, 290 plus use cases are on blockchain. Dubai has announced everything is on now transformed, automated either with a blockchain, AI, and other technology. Similarly, we need to see how as an individual, how as an unit or how is in a department or an organization or a country, right? How can we as a state can evolve on the blockchain, right? We have seen money movement so far. I will not be surprised if you see some kind of a Bitcoin as a form of for Indians, or a sugarcane coin, right, which removes all those intermediaries, or you talk about milk coin in Gujarat, or this solar coin in Rajasthan, right? That's how we can really do with the blockchain kind of a technology, because it offers many more features, single source of the truth, like internet doesn't offer. Programmable smart contract, what we have seen is a paper contract, which can be altered. Irreversible traceability, a lot of fraud does happen on internet, but this feature will give a better ecosystem. Data security, multi-party trust needed, zero operations, and decentralized, right? Primarily, it can go to the next level. These are the 8 features. It can go furthermore while we advance onto the technology. There are many use cases. I think these use cases are already implemented, right? We talk about crypto exchanges, but apart from that, diamond industry, supply chain, e-commerce, smart trading, SME trading, car leasing, what not, right? Globally, these media and entertainment, financial and media entertainment are heavily adopted on a blockchain side. And certainly there will be every ecosystem will adopt a blockchain for sure, because everywhere we need kind of a trust out there, right? So at India level, what is that needed is a collaboration to create, although we have created national strategy, but how do we take it to the next forward, right? It's very, very important to collaborate, create that education, what we see, how KBA drives, or how there are many more entities are driving it at India level. We need kind of a national task force, right, which comes and talks about what are the use cases of blockchain. Let's not talk about only crypto or only NFT, but what are the use cases for normal citizens? What are those technology stack, right? How do we really technology relevant challenge? How do we mitigate? How do we create a simple adoption of a blockchain technology as a business, as a technology, as an architect? What are those features, things we need to take care of with help of regulation and compliance? How do we create accelerator programs for the startups? And how do we create a better consortium use cases? Because it's individual as a bank can do it, but consortium use cases will give a lot of boost to the overall blockchain ecosystem in India, right? A lot of work is happening among all of these stakeholders, Aadhaar, Startup India, everybody is working on this. So good to say that we are blessed with these entities, NPCIs, Niti Aayog, who are driving at a nationally blockchain kind of ecosystem. But it will take a lot of time, right? It will take years together. Although we don't talk about internet now, internet has seen its challenges, adoption, maturity. Similarly, we'll have to work on that, so that in 2030 we'll not talk about blockchain. We'll talk only around only use cases, right? So thank you so much for inviting me here to talk about what is the reality of blockchain, where we stand, what all things we need to do so that we can see many more mainstream use cases for a blockchain. Yeah, thank you so much, Kerala Blockchain Academy and Kerala Startup Mission for inviting me here for this wonderful morning. Look forward how our participants take care of blockchain here onwards. Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you, Mr. Prasanna, for giving your valuable insights on the use cases of blockchain technology in various sectors, and also for convincing about how the privacy aspect is also taken care of. So thank you so much for joining us today. Moving on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on, we have a tech talk titled Blockchain and Smart Contracts 101. Mr. Zaryab Afsar, lead smart contracts engineer, Ethereum push notification service, is with us today. He is a smart contract engineer who is currently working on creating the world's first decentralized notification protocol at EPNS. He is also a smart contract security auditor, as he works on smart contract code reviews and also with auditing firms like Solidity in the US. And lastly, he is a technical content creator or writer and create content on smart contracts and blockchains. So Mr. Zaryab, welcome to the Blockchain Summit 2022. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya. That was really a nice intro. Cool. Should I start by sharing my screen? Will that be okay?
Yes, sure.
Perfect. Do let me know if you guys can see my screen clearly.
Yes, it is visible.
Perfect. So the topic for today is blockchain and smart contracts 101, where I try to provide eagle eye perspective and a brief overview of what smart contracts really are. While there was a really interesting conversation going on before my speech, Mr. Prasanna, and it was really an interesting discussion that we had, I will try to specify and specifically talk more about smart contracts. So before I begin, a brief intro. I mean, actually, I did a good job mentioning it. Yeah. I write smart contracts, I audit smart contracts, and I create technical content around smart contracts. So most of my life right now is revolving around smart contracts, right? At EPNS, I'm trying to build, and we are together trying to build the world's first notification protocol, decentralized communication layer for Web3. I also do code reviews, where it's basically meaning I try to find bugs in a smart contract and try to save people's money. And I create technical content which helps developers on board and try to learn the smart contract development very effectively. Moving on, let's plan the journey and set the expectations for what will happen in the next 30 minutes. So in order to make this session really effective, I try to break it down into 3 different sections. So first is going to be the intro, the concern, and the inception. So in the intro, we will basically look at the origin, significance, and the working mechanism of smart contracts, and really high-level overview of whatever I can cover in the time frame. The concern, because I come from a security background as well, so I cannot really stop myself from talking about security limitations of a smart contract as of now. And then the third part is inception, where if you are a developer and you would like to start your journey with Web3, how do you do that? So to begin with, the intro. Pretty much most of us now is quite aware of what blockchains are. If you open the internet, the sentences that you'll find is basically an open distributed ledger that can record transaction between 2 parties, not just in an efficient manner, but also in a verifiable and permanent fashion. Now, what's important to note here is the words that are highlighted. It's a distributed ledger, which means there is no central authority control. It's verifiable, which means it's transparent. People can always verify the status of a transaction. And it's permanent in nature, which is one of the very glorified features of blockchain, which basically means it's immutable. Once the data is on blockchain, it cannot be altered, right? These 3 core features of blockchain is what led to the beautiful creation of Bitcoin. With his 9-page long Bitcoin white paper, for the first time in the history of humankind, Satoshi Nakamoto showed the world how easy, effective, and necessary it was to transact without the need for central authority control and without the need for intermediaries. Right? If we really look at the world today, since the launch of Bitcoin in 2009 till date, Web3 has come a long way, right? Today we have incredible projects with really significant use cases. If you look at the total value logged in DeFi right now, it's more than $73 billion, right? We are noticing incredible use cases around us, be it crowdfunding, crypto exchanges, entertainment, gaming, supply chains, DeFi, and then like cool stuffs like flash loans or decentralized way of lending and borrowing, things that never existed before, right? Or be it notification protocol that we are trying to build, right? But when you look at all these use cases, the question that might pop up in your mind is blockchain technology specifically capable of all these wide range of use cases? Alone, if we specifically talk about blockchain technology, is it really capable of doing so? The answer is probably not. And the reason is blockchain technology in itself is quite static in nature, right? It has really cool features like decentralization, security, immutability, but at its very core, it's quite static, right? It allows you to store data in a very secure manner. It allows you to retrieve it, but that's mostly it, right? For complex computations like, let's say, flash loan or stable coins that are algorithmically made stable, for such complex transactions, blockchain is not really suited. Then the question remains: what makes blockchain do all these complex things that we look at on DeFi today or Web3 in general today? That's where smart contracts comes into play, which is why I said the heart of blockchains lies the smart contract, and which really enables us to do and the wonderful things that we see today in the Web3 world. So now that we know what smart contracts, the significance of smart contract is, it's really a good time to understand what smart contracts in general are. So I don't think we can begin talking about smart contracts without talking about the man himself, Nick Szabo, who was actually the inventor of smart contracts. And quite opposite to what most of us might think, the smart contract came along with Ethereum. It's not really true, because smart contracts existed and were invented before even Bitcoin was there in existence, right? So in 1994, Nick Szabo created this smart contract It gained its popularity with Ethereum because Ethereum was the first platform in the world to really apply the concept of smart contract effectively, right? So in general, if we talk about smart contract and a very eagle-eye perspective of what smart contracts are, they basically are self-executing digital contracts, right? There are a certain set of rules that that does not need any central authority control or a third party to monitor. It is a self-executing contract. Conditions and the rules in the contract execute only when the particular conditions are met, right? It's immutable in nature, which again, inherits the feature of blockchain, which is immutability. It's immutable in nature, which means once the rules are coded in the smart contract, they can't be changed, which allows us to trust the code, right? It eliminates any need of middleman, because in order to execute the rules, in order to do whatever is mentioned in the code, we do not need a middleman or a third party to govern that what is actually happening. It's the blockchain that does the thing, right? And obviously, it works for central authority control. Now, I guess the best way to understand smart contracts is by looking at some of the use cases, right? Uh, if you open up the internet now and you try searching for smart contracts, chances are you will find something called vending machine. And there is this comparison done with vending machines. And just in case you're not aware of why it's done, here I am to explain that. So most often smart contracts are compared to the way vending machines work. And if we specifically talk about vending machines, what it really does, and I mean, at its very core, vending machines are just automated shops, right? There is a shop, there are products, and there are customers, but it does not really need a shopkeeper to govern and to sell things. It's just an automated machine that takes money from you, gives the product back to you. Everything that happens when you interact with a vending machine is predefined, right? Let's say there is a Coke for $10. Only when you input $10 and the valid conditions are met, you get a valid output, which is a can of Coke, right? Very similarly to this, smart contracts work exactly similar. So smart contracts have a predefined set of rules that exist, right? Let's say, for example, there is a smart contract that has a function called a withdraw function, which allows users to withdraw a particular amount of token, let's say 100 tokens specifically, and at the interval of every 7 days, right? Now the valid input here that the user, whenever they want to withdraw, they can only withdraw $100 worth of token. And the condition is they have to withdraw it after every 7 days. Now, let's say if a user comes and he tries to withdraw 100 worth of tokens, and he's withdrawing that in an interval of 7 days, which means he has given a valid input, which is $100 worth of tokens. He's following the conditions, which is he's trying to withdraw after a valid condition, which is after 7 days, which is why he will get the valid output and the $100 worth of token will be transferred to his address. But let's say a malicious actor or a user is not really following the rules. He is trying to enter $1,000 worth of tokens, which is the valid input according to the smart contract rules. He's trying to withdraw it after every 2 days or not really in an interval of 7 days. The smart contract won't execute because it knows that the rules are violated, right? This is why vending machines are compared to smart contracts in order to define that every preset of rules that are defined in the smart contracts, they're also enforced and without the need of any third party. So this is where the interesting part begins. So I try to explain this with a very high level example of Alice Bob, let's say, which are very popular name in the Web3 world if you look at examples. So let's say Alice and Bob, two different persons from different corners of the world, wants to do a trustless transaction, right? In essence, what they want is Alice wants to transfer a product or let's say a freelance service to Bob in exchange for some tokens, and that they want this transaction to be really effective and really trustless because they don't really know each other and then they don't really want to know each other to do this transaction, right? What are the options that they have in hand? So one of the things is they are obviously the escrow contracts. They can go for a traditional escrow contract or they can go for smart contracts, right? So Bob and Alice, they decides to explore the traditional escrow contracts, which basically means they will lock their funds in there until the particular condition is met, and only when the conditions are met, the funds will be given out, or the transaction is completed. Only then the escrow will unlock their funds. So they try to understand the escrow contract and they try to evaluate if it's fit for the transaction. Now, what do they find? They find that first of all, it's a no-brainer that when you use a third party like this, there is excessive trust that you have to put in, right? You have to really trust that the escrow contract and the middlemen involved, they won't really take away your money, which is not really what they wanted, because they wanted the transactions to be trustless, right? Is it deterministic? Not really, because a lot of things can go wrong when in a system humans are involved, because majority of the mistakes are done by humans, right? So it's not really deterministic. They don't really know if they lock their funds, and if something happens, uh, what actions are taken, because it's variable. It can change according to the situation, right? What about the speed? Let's say they want to do this transaction on a Sunday, on a holiday, the escrow service might not be available and they can't really do it. Or let's say if they start this process, the reason that there are a lot of intermediaries and third parties involved in the process, there is a lot of delay in the speed, right? It's quite heavy on the wallet, because again, when there are actors involved in a particular system, chances are they are there for incentives, and they will need their incentives in the form of money, which again means Bob and Alice has to throw away some extra money to fulfill all these intermediaries. Is it reusable? And obviously it's not. For every time Bob and Alice wants to do a transaction, they have to create a new contract, they have to lock in the funds again, and it's a long process that goes on again and again. So Bob and Alice decides that they won't really go with the traditional escrow contract, and they will go with the smart contract, right? Now, the tricky part, and this is where I'll slightly move into the technicalities of how smart contracts are developed in general, and very high level overview. And there's a lot of things that are not really included in this. I'll continue the time, but yeah, it will give you a brief idea. So Bob and Alice decides to do this entire thing with a smart contract, right? Now, the thing with the smart contract is there is no one governing body. No one will ensure that the transaction has actually happened, or when Alice should receive the payment for her freelance service, or when Bob should give the money. Bob should confirm the transaction. All of this needs to be done in the form of code, which means we have to have a very clear idea and understanding of how we want to design the contract, right? So when we start designing this contract, there are obvious checkpoints, and there can be more, but I just noted on 3 points. What if Alice never really initiates the transaction, never really do the freelance job that she's supposed to do? What if Bob never confirmed the transaction? So basically, let's say Alice did her freelance service and she transferred it to Bob, and Bob is not confirming that the transaction is done and not really giving the money. Or what if the transaction in overall is never completed, right? These are the checkpoints that we have. These are the hurdles that we have when we are trying to create the contract for Alice and Bob, right? Now, in order to overcome this checkpoints, we have to decide and we have to really clarify of how the rules in the contract should be. So let's say we sit down and we decide the rules of the contract. And we say that Alice, first of all, must lock X amount of tokens in the contract. Why? Alice is supposed to provide a freelance service, say, and when Alice locks a particular amount of tokens in the contract, and there can be multiple ways of designing the rules, but this is just a brief understanding of how we can proceed with one procedure, right? So let's say Alice locks X amount of tokens in the contract. This is to ensure that Alice is really serious about what she does, and she really is into the transaction, and she wants the transaction to happen. Otherwise, the contract will perhaps lock her tokens, right? Bob, on the other hand, who is the receiver of the freelance service, he has to lock X plus Y amount of token, let's say. Why Y amount of tokens? Because that's the security deposit. Because Bob is an interesting character here, is an interesting actor in this transaction. Because let's say Alice transfers her freelance service to Bob, and it's only after Bob confirms the transaction that this transaction can be considered valid, right? So let's say Bob never confirms that the transaction happened. In that case, Bob will actually lose money, which is comparatively more than Alice loses, which is why this is a way of penalizing Bob, that if you don't act accurately, you will be penalized, right? So the rules are as follows. Alice must lock X amount of tokens. Bob must lock X plus Y amount of tokens, which is slightly more than what Alice logged. Alice then initiates the transaction of the asset or the service. Once Bob receives the service, he confirms that the transaction is complete, and only after Bob confirms, the parties can withdraw their logged tokens, right? And let's say if no transaction takes place, then within a predefined amount of time, and which we also have to define that, okay, there's a 7-day of period, and within the 7 days, this transaction should happen, right? And this will be coded in the smart contract. So if no transaction happens within 7 days, funds will be allowed, but with a penalty fee. So this is a punishment for both actors for not really following the rules. Now, if we come back to our checkpoints that we had initially, First question that we had is, what if Alice ever initiates the transaction? Well, Alice loses his fund, right? The smart contract has this beautiful feature of that they can store tokens as well. They can store money, right? And since Alice logged his tokens before the initiating the transaction, if she doesn't really follow the rules, she might lose her tokens. What if Bob never confirms the transaction? Even after he receives the service, he says that, no, I didn't receive. What happens then? Well, then Bob loses his tokens as well, and which is more than Alice's token. So Bob will be penalized heavier, right? And which really incentivizes Bob to not become a bad actor and become a good actor and confirm the transaction whenever it's done. What if the transaction never happens? Well, then there is a penalty fee that both parties have to pay. This example, the reason I put it is because to make you guys understand that smart contracts allow us not just to define the rules, but they are also capable of enforcing the rules. Smart contracts are not just, they don't just allow users to be rewarded, it's also capable of penalizing users. And the fact that we can penalize and reward users is what allows us to create beautiful game theories around smart contracts, to create beautiful tokenomics around smart contracts, with the smart contracts, right? So this is how this entire contract can be made for Alice and Bob, and they can really do their transaction in a trustless fashion without trusting any central authority or any third party, right? Now, let's say we have this set of rules, which is in the form of a document. And what happens after that? How do we proceed with this creation of smart contracts? So there are basically just 4 steps at an, again, eagle-eye perspective. So the first step is basically converting all of these rules that we've written down into code. We'll probably choose a smart contract language like Solidity to write this code. So the first step is the crucial one, because this is where we convert our decisions, our rules into codes. And we have to ensure that the intent and behavior is same in both the documents. It's same as we define the rules, and the exact same rules should be copied in the code, and it should behave as expected, right? Once the code is written, the second step will be the testing and auditing of the smart contracts. The reason this step is very important is because we know that the smart contracts are immutable, right? And while it's not completely true, because the smart contracts are upgradable as well now, but again, that's a very tedious process, and that's a very heavy process of creating a smart contract. So in general, smart contracts are immutable, and it's very hard to change any detail in the smart contract if you have done something wrong once it's deployed. So testing and auditing is a very important step. With this ensures us that the smart contract has been battle tested, and it has covered all the scenarios where it can go wrong, and all the things that can go wrong has been fixed before. Auditing, again, is the same thing. We have to review the code and understand if there is any bug. Once we are very sure that, okay, now the code is ready to be deployed, we take that code and we deploy it on a blockchain. Once we deploy on the blockchain, this is where smart contracts inherits from its core features, from the blockchain's core features, which is immutability, decentralization, and security, right? And once it's deployed, it's replicated among all the nodes and participants of the blockchain network. Now, in the final state, there is this execution of smart contracts, right? This is where users are finally able to interact with the smart contract. Now, interacting with the smart contract basically means you can either read from the contract or write to the contract. And here is one really interesting concept that comes along, which is the concept of gas, which again is a huge topic in itself. But in very simpler terms, gas is the unit that measures the amount of computational effort required to execute a specific operations in Ethereum. In simpler terms, gas is basically the fuel for doing any transaction on Ethereum, right? Now, when you read from the contract that is deployed on the blockchain, it does not really require any gas because you're just reading. When you write to a contract, it basically means you're trying to modify a state in the blockchain itself. And that's when you have to pay gas fees, which is basically mostly in Ether if you're using Ethereum blockchain. And that gas fee depends on how complex is the transaction that you're trying to do. So this is the final state. Once deployed, the contract is ready for execution. Every time the state is changed, it is replicated among all the networks in all the nodes in the particular network, and that's how the contract is ready for Alice and Bob to be used, right? Now that we have seen this example, now it's very clear for us to really understand the significance of smart contracts. So first of all, like I mentioned, it doesn't just define the rule; it also has the capability of enforcing the rule. And it also has the capability of enforcing actors that you have to behave really good, otherwise you might be penalized. And no one does that. No one really penalizes explicitly. Smart contract is capable of doing it on its own, right? Second thing is smart contracts are very, it involves a very speedy process, why we don't really have to wait because there are no intermediaries. We can really interact very faster and comparatively do things more effectively. It's reliable because it inherits from the core features of blockchain. It's immutable, it's transparent, and we can really rely on it. It's cost effective. Well, I mean, if the gas price is too high, the only cost is to pay for the gas price. But it's really the fact that we have really wiped out a lot of intermediaries in the process, it becomes really cost effective. It's deterministic. We really know what happens if Alice or Bob or if any actor breaks the rule. It's very deterministic to understand that if someone breaks the rule, this is what's going to happen to him. So determinism is a feature that we really appreciate in smart contracts. And lastly, elimination of any third-party interference because it executes on its own, right? Now, where we shift slightly to the concerns part, now because I mostly work on audits as well and security part of smart contracts, I cannot really keep myself talking what the concerns are. So is it really all sunshine rainbows? Is it really smart contracts are all fit for the world? Answer is probably no. The reason is again, so let's talk about the limitations. First of all is security. No matter how important or no matter how impressive smart contracts might look with all its features of elimination of third parties, we cannot really forget that it's after all a code, and code has bugs, right? In general, a bug in the code doesn't really matter because we can always fix it. But again, the feature of smart contracts that is really glorified, which is immutability, becomes its limitation as well. Because once a contract is deployed and we find any bug, there is no way we can fix it because again, it's immutable. So this is one of the limitations of smart contracts. The third point, which is quite interesting, is let's say for a blockchain like Ethereum, when smart contracts are deployed there, it is excessively depending on the Ethereum architecture itself, which basically means if tomorrow something happens to Ethereum, or if tomorrow there is major upgrade to Ethereum, which affects your contract, then your contracts get affected, right? It's not a standalone contract. It slightly relies on the platform that it is built on. While some of the protocols today, like for example, Cosmos is trying to solve this issue, but with a specific application-specific blockchains, but it's not really solved yet. The fourth limitation that I find is the nascent stages. If you look at Solidity code, that language that we try to use for writing smart contracts, it's still in the 0.8 around version, right? Which basically means it's at its very nascent stages, very early stages. With every new version, Solidity, if you are developing Solidity, you might know that there are certain updates and there are certain bugs that are covered that existed in the previous version, which basically means almost every version tries to improve itself and improve the bugs, which basically means every version that we put in might have some sort of bugs that we are still unaware of. And it's a huge risk because smart contracts deals a lot with money, right? The last point is in limitation is basically smart contracts by design are a black box. They cannot really interact with the real world. So for interacting with the real world, we have to rely on oracles, which again, we are not very sure if they are providing the right data. So these are some of the limitations that we have in smart contract as of today, but I hope this will not be the case moving forward. If we talk about hacks, I mean, most of you might know the DAO hack, the greatest DAO hack that has happened. And it was one of the most, first hack that happened in the history of blockchains, which basically is a big deal because after this hack, we realized what truly smart, why auditing or testing of a smart contract is important, right? At the time when it was launched in 2016, almost 15% of the total ether in circulation was in that DAO hack, right? And the reason, one of the most important reason it was hacked was because of reentrancy, which is a bug in a smart contract. And the fact that it was not found while testing is something that there is a lot of concern, which is why contracts that are deployed today, they do rely a lot on auditing and they do rely a lot on testing to ensure that there is no such bug that can lead to such massive hacks. But again, like I mentioned, it's a very nascent stage and it's not always about the bug. I mean, if you look at year 2020, more than $100 million were lost. It's due to just smart contract hacks. And not all of those hacks were because of bugs. Some of them are price related manipulation. Some of them were flash loan attacks, right? So the fact that it's very at its early stages, there are quite a few new attacks that you might witness in the future, because no one really knows how things will change with every new version, right? So is there any possible solution for all to mitigate the risk of smart contracts? Probably there is, and I find two very useful solutions for that. The first is, when you develop smart contracts, you have to really follow the security practices. It's not really recommended to reinvent the wheel. And because every time you try to reinvent the wheel, chances are you have done something new. And if it's something new, it has not been tested before. And the fact that smart contracts is store a lot of money and deals with really important things, it's important to follow security practices. And the second solution is to do extensive code reviews and smart contract audits every time you finish development of a contract, right? What really happens in audits? Let me just quickly go through this. In an audit, at least I follow the 5 steps, which is basically, first of all, understanding what the project is about, documentation gathering, and understand. This is where the thing that I mentioned, conversion of words into codes, this is where it's tested. Secondly, evaluation of the test cases. Does the test case of a particular smart contract cover all its cases, or is it not really covering anything? Automated testing is basically using tools like Slither and trying to figure out what smart contract issues might exist. Then comes, because automated testing as well are at the very early stages, we cannot really rely on them. We have to include manual code review, which is where 2 or 3 auditors work together on a particular smart contract, and they try to review the code line by line and try to understand if there is any slightest possibility of a hack. The fifth step is what I follow is to document reports, which doesn't just include the issue that was found. We also try to provide what exactly can be done to fix the issue, right? This is what the security part and the concern part of a smart contract that exists, and the possible solutions for them. Now, let's say you're really interested in smart contracts and you want to join the Web3 world as a developer of smart contracts. How do you start, right? Even before starting in step 1, the step 0 is to start from scratch, just in case you are not really aware of what computer science in general is. It's really important to know that, because the true significance of anything can be understood not by what it is, but what problem does it solve. And you cannot understand what problem smart contracts or blockchain solve unless you understand the history of Web 1, Web 2. And it's really important to know that. So just in case you're already a developer, then it's good to go. You can start with the step 1, which is basically understanding the basics of Ethereum, understanding what really goes into Ethereum architecture, what is Ethereum virtual machine, which actually allows a smart contract to run. What are EOA, right? What the difference between a contract's address and a privately owned address, individual's address? What exactly is gas, right? Or if you have played with MetaMask in general. Ether Scan Block Explorer can be great help when you learn the basics, because it really allows you to look into and really touch blockchain in a way that you understand, okay, this is the transaction fees, this is how much gas is used when transaction is done. So that should be understood when you are learning the basics. But let's move a step further, and let's say you're trying to understand how smart contracts work. In general, an overview of smart contracts is what I just already covered. So it basically involves basically a smart contract, what it does, its features, and then understanding the life cycle that I explained, which is developing, testing, and then deployment, compilation, and testing, and then actually execution of the code. Once you are done with the basics of Ethereum and blockchain, you are free to choose a language. If you are more into JavaScript, you might choose Solidity, and if you are a Python lover, you might end up choosing Viper. But anyways, both of them are smart contract languages, and you have to understand the basics of how smart contracts are developed. Compiling, testing, and deploying smart contracts are something that you have to understand. But then once you have learned the basics of a smart contract, it's important for you to understand these 2 libraries, which are Web3.js or Web3.py, which is in Py for Python and Web3.js for JavaScript, which basically allows you to interact with a smart contract and also connect your smart contract to the web front end, right? where can you learn this? Best sources to learn Solidity is obviously the Solidity documentation. There is this interactive tool called Crypto Zombies, which I guess would really help. Open Zeppelin's the content around smart contract. Open Zeppelin is, by the way, one of the security firms out there, and is really good at creating content around smart contract development and best security practices. The tools that you can use, obviously, the first one is Remix, which is the online IDE where you can develop Solidity code and really do things fast. An advanced version of developing production grade smart contracts is to use Truffle or Hard, which are frameworks for developing smart contract. And just in case you come from a Python language background, you might find Brownie very interesting. Raising the bar basically means once you know the basics of contract, you have to understand that today, as of now, a lot of smart contract applications revolve around DeFi and decentralized finance, which basically means you have to understand a lot of things that has to do with decentralized finance, which is understanding the token standards. What is ERC-20 721, which is a fungible and non-fungible contracts. Like I mentioned, smart contracts can be upgraded now. They are not really immutable because we can change the logic with smart contracts now. And in order to change the logic, there are specific standards of how you can change it. So the two most popular are ERC-1976 proxy, which is a transparent upgradable proxy, and then ERC-1822 proxy, which is a universal upgradable proxy standard. So when you try to understand upgradable contracts, you have to understand these proxy standards as well. Then comes, since if you join a smart contract world right now, you will have to interact with a lot of protocols as well. And that basically means you need to understand the terms and projects that are there, which basically are lending and borrowing. How does it happen in DeFi? What exactly is flash loan? How is it possible for community to decide on governance mechanism and on-chain governance? How does it work? What exactly is tokenomics? And some of the important projects that you can explore is Uniswap, Aave, ENS, and alternate solutions like Polygon. This is all about the development part of Solidity. But just in case you are really interested in the security part, which is, by the way, very interesting, this is what you can do. You can basically start from learning what hacks and attacks have happened in the past, and then learning how we can mitigate those attacks and the possibility of happening those attacks in the future. Some of the very important tools and games that you can play. By the way, like the best way to learn security is to actually hack something or try to play interactive games that allow you to really touch the security concept of smart contracts, which is why I have pasted some links here, which is Ethernaut and Damn Vulnerable DeFi, which will help you really understand how a hack is processed. Some of the tools that you can use is Slither, which is my favorite one for automated testing. Ikinda, which is for fuzz testing, Surya, which is for visualization, and Tenderly, which is for real-time smart contract monitoring. This is how you learn security part of smart contracts, use the tools, right? To end my slide, I would like to focus on the fact that when you develop smart contracts or when you review smart contracts, you need to understand that it's a job of a lot of responsibilities, right? There is a lot of money that is going to be there in the smart contract, and you as a developer or auditor is responsible for anything that happens with the contract. So again, being able to develop contracts or being able to decentralize the whole world of finance, it's a great power, right, that you have in your hands as a developer. And as our lovely Spider-Man has always said, with great power comes great responsibility. So we really have to keep that in mind and approach the craft accordingly. So I guess, yeah, that's my time. And I hope you find it interesting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Azaria, for breaking down the concepts into layman terms so that we all get to understand more about the technology and also make us understand that it's a smarter choice to go for smart contracts. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Surya. Means a lot.
Thank you. Moving on, next we have a keynote address by Mr. Arun Maharajan, Blockchain Lead, Unicef Innovation Fund. Mr. Arun comes with over 15 years of diverse experiences: systems engineer, software developer, technical leader, entrepreneur, management consultant, business developer, and product guy. He is really passionate about the future that blockchain technology holds for all of us. So without further ado, let me invite Mr. Arun Maharajan to deliver the keynote address. Over to you, Mr. Arun.
Thanks a lot. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
All right. Please let me know when you can see see my screen.
Sure.
Just share the. Is it
Yes.
visible?
Yes, it is.
Great. Now?
Yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. Okay. Thanks a lot for having me. And that was a fantastic talk by Nazaria. I was hearing the whole thing. That was fascinating about the dynamics of smart contracts, and I did catch a little bit of the previous speaker Prasanna, who portrayed a very good image of all the possibilities using blockchain and Web3 and all that from his unique perspective. I mean, these were fantastic sessions. My focus, though, today would be on where the rubber can meet the road when it comes to blockchains and Web3, and more specifically from the angle of social good. Because I work for Unicef. I'm the blockchain lead at the Unicef Ventures team. So we are focused on encouraging and creating solutions which will ultimately help children and young people around the world. So that is going to be more the focus. So it will be more on how the end applications actually create impact. So that said, for those of you who are not aware, UNICEF is a 75-year-old organization. We are an agency within the United Nations, focusing on children and young people. So we are present in 190 countries. We are around an $8 billion operation. And an interesting fact is we are the largest buyer of vaccines for children in the world. So how does UNICEF see innovation? So we define innovation as new and significantly improved solution that, of course, contributes to the progress of children. Right? I mean, basically, it's about doing things new and then solving problems. It's a very straightforward definition. So with that in mind, there are certain things that we do at the venture team and the larger Office of Innovation, which is first of all, we identify emerging technologies and we create partnerships around them. We invest in early stage solutions that, of course, impact children. And then we internally prototype emerging technologies to expand their application, even inside UNICEF. So all the work that we do with the private sector, with startup world, we then learn from them and then we try to apply them inside UNICEF as well. So I'm part of the UNICEF Venture Fund, which is, you can imagine this to be like a venture capital firm, but inside a UN organization. The venture capital fund, the venture fund has about $35 million in USD approximately. And interestingly, we also hold cryptocurrency. So we have raised about 2,500 Ether and then about 8 Bitcoin. So this is a vehicle that is used to invest in growing new solutions that, I mean, we have a saying that exists at the intersection of $100 billion business markets, but also meeting a billion persons' needs. So this is a slide that sort of shows what I'm talking about. So we invest at solutions which is at the intersection of this across technologies, as you can see on the left. Blockchain being just one of them, but it is a very major part of our focus. So, as I said, we are like a venture capital firm within an UN agency, but unlike other VC firms, we do not take equity. We are not in it for the profit or to make money. But what we do demand from our startups is that they create, or at least they get onto the path to create digital public goods, of course, oriented towards the needs of children. So UNICEF is also part of the Digital Public Good Alliance, which involves entities from the government of Norway, from the government of Germany, Sierra Leone, and then so on and so forth. There are a bunch of other people as well. So we are very big on the creation of digital public goods, as we feel that they are what can scale for the future at a global level to address all sorts of issues that exist in society today. So that said, this is a little bit of overview of the areas in the world where our investments have reached and where there have been a creation of digital public goods. So now getting on to the topic of blockchain itself and crypto, what does Unicef have to do with this, right? So we explore blockchain and crypto to be able to do three things mainly. So the first one is we explore it to create innovative financing models, and then as the previous speaker said, blockchain is immutable, it's secure, it's transparent. So for point two, we explore it to increase the efficiency and transparency of processes. And then the last one, as I said, we are big on digital public goods. So we explore blockchain techniques and solutions to see how we can incentivize and encourage the creation of open source digital public goods. By digital public goods, it's not limited only to software. So it can be software, it can be hardware, it can be data, anything. So not many people know this, but Unicef innovation team has been playing around with blockchain since 2015 with our first experiments. So and then we are going strong still, because as the ecosystem grows, we are seeing an explosion of use cases and stuff. So it is very, very fascinating. So the crypto fund itself was launched in 2019, and then there is a whole bunch of activity which has been happening. So this is to give an overview. Now coming to the crypto fund itself, it is a prototype fund to where we can accept donations in cryptocurrency, and then we disburse them to these startups that we mentor to create the digital public goods. So these are early stage startups, and of course they have to be using open source technology, and then ultimately open source their entire solution or part of their solution, depending on the scope that is discussed. So this is a cross section of the kind of investments that the crypto fund has made. So till date, we have invested about 1,600 Ether and then 1 Bitcoin into a bunch of startups across technology areas. As you can see, a lot of them are to do with blockchain. And I'll be giving a little bit of a flavor of the current blockchain cohort, which we are investing in, to give a sense of what I mentioned earlier, where the rubber hits the road, how blockchain could be potentially used for social good. So we have invested in a startup called BX Smart Labs, which is from Mexico. So they have built a decentralized app for saving circles. These are typically informal groups which are formed mostly around family and friends, where they invest money in a periodic basis, and then they take out money when there is need. So by bringing this onto the blockchain, the scope of saving circles vastly increases, because it is no more reliant on geography, and then all the benefits of blockchain, where you can trace every transaction, where every transaction is signed by the individual, where there is security involved, all that comes into play. So they are right now in the piloting stage, and it's pretty good so far. The second startup that I want to talk about is called Kotani Pay. So they are from Kenya. They have created an off-ramping solution, meaning a solution where people holding crypto can convert it to the local currency without the need of a bank account or without the need of a very strong internet connectivity. You don't even need a smartphone to do this. So this brings financial inclusion for their target audience, and they have processed approximately 23,000 transactions till now with 3,000 unique customers. Then there is Leaf. It is a virtual bank in some sense. So they've made a wallet, which again can be operated without a smartphone, and they are more focused on cross-border transactions. So Leaf works very closely with the refugees in that area, and then they are trying to improve their lives from, of course, the financial perspective using their solution. So they are right now scaling up across Africa, and then trying to enable the ecosystem there. So they bring in all sorts of advantages to the unbanked, underbanked, and then the people who struggle, like refugees. Rumzan is a Nepali startup. So Nepal as a country sees a lot of natural disasters. So they are working on a blockchain-based system which will help in emergency response and aid distribution by humanitarian agencies. So they use a blockchain to track the payments, basically. In this case, a digital cash and voucher, so that process becomes smooth, transparent, and then traceable, and then ultimately simpler for all the players involved, not just the humanitarian aid agency. For example, Unicef can be an aid agency, but there are also others, but also the vendors, the distributors, and ultimately the beneficiary of the aid. So they have run a few pilots, and they have reached about 3,000 beneficiaries so far. Treasure is a very interesting startup. They are in Iran. So they are, in some sense, they use DeFi, NFTs, and all the latest things that are happening in public blockchains in a very interesting manner. So it is a completely open protocol where the idea is to collect funding, or rather work with funders, and then take the funds and then help planters of trees plant trees. So it's sort of a community empowerment protocol, and then where we create a win-win for the planet as a whole. So till now, about 100,000 trees have been committed by planters across 15 countries. The Genesis launch was in January, so we are very eagerly watching what sort of results are produced by this protocol. Then Excapit is Argentinian startup. So they have built an app where they educate the public on crypto, and then also provide pathways for them to start saving, and also take loans, and then engage with the DeFi ecosystem for wealth management. So this is very interesting because Argentina as a country is right now facing a very high inflation, and then their thesis is this can help the people survive that. So they also have very decent traction for an early stage startup. So about 12,700 users have downloaded their app in about 50 countries. So I hope this gives a sort of an idea about where blockchain can be used to benefit the real world, actual people, and then be used for social good. Of course, there is a lot of opportunity right now that is seen in the news. I mean, the crypto is a $1 trillion industry, and then DeFi is $1 billion, NFT is $1 billion. All this is great, but ultimately, what that ecosystem makes is to make the technology more robust and then more popular, where it invites developers from around the world to come and contribute. So that is fantastic. But the hope is that a lot of that effort can be applied to for social good, and then for other causes as well, as we have seen in these examples. So there are again a world of possibilities here, not just in finance, but in other areas as well. So we also build internal prototypes. So it's not merely a venture fund, but it's also like a simple prototyping lab. So Juniper is a toolkit that we are building internally, which we hope to open source ourselves, and then to make it available for public sector organizations and to other intergovernmental organizations if they wish to work with cryptocurrencies. We also work with various countries inside the Unicef umbrella, and then help them meet their requirements or need for experiments on blockchain. For example, we have worked with the Kazakhstan office in Unicef, where we used blockchain in a pilot to improve transparency and efficiency in terms of payments of vendors using smart contracts, which the previous speaker alluded to. And there is a broader UN engagement that we do as well. So it's not just UNICEF alone, but UNICEF works with other UN agencies. For example, we have a platform called the Atrium, which is an interagency platform where we exchange about blockchain, where we learn, and then there are some ideas to take this forward as an interagency blockchain. We have various working groups, and there is a lot of learning that happens internally across the United Nations ecosystem. So that's roughly a sort of a overview about what we do, and then hopefully this helped in understanding how blockchains can be applied for social good. Of course, I spoke of the UNICEF context, but there are a lot of other contexts as well. You can learn more about our work in these websites. One interesting thing that I want to mention is right now the venture fund has a call open for blockchain startups. The deadline is 8th of March. You can find the links in our social channels on Twitter, which is on the left at UNICEF Innovate, or on our LinkedIn. So please check it out if you're aware of any startup, early stage startup that is using blockchain and then working in some sort of a humanitarian area. We would love to hear from them. So that's about it. Thank you. If there are any questions, I can take it. Otherwise, yeah, I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Arun, for throwing light on the concept of the contribution of blockchain technology in social good and the world of opportunities that are out there. It is really amazing to know how the UN organizations are taking different strides by making use of the technology and build a better tomorrow. So thank you so much for enlightening us with the insights.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the next session, I would like to make an announcement about the National Innovation Challenge by KSUM and Hitachi. Showcase your innovative, smart agriculture and rural banking solutions and win monetary grants worth 60 lakhs from Hitachi, India. Submit an abstract of the solution for Phase 1 before 22nd February 2022. For Phase 2, shortlisted startups from Phase 1 create a prototype and submit the final deliverables between 25th February and 15th March 2022. So begin submitting your applications for the National Innovation Challenge right away. Please check the announcement tab for the registration link. So up next, we have a power talk titled Web 3.0 and Indian startup ecosystem by Mr. Ajit Khurana, crypto expert and advisor to crypto projects. Mr. Ajit Khurana is a notable figure in the cryptocurrency industry. He is the former head of the Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Committee, which, as part of IAMAI, is India's foremost industry body for cryptocurrency. Ajit is an author, entrepreneur, prolific angel investor, former CEO of ZepPay, former CEO of the business incubator Sign at IIT Bombay, and former advisor to Kalari Capital. He has raised venture capital, expanded businesses globally, developed low-cost customer acquisition strategies, and is a wizard at financial engineering. Presenting, he is a venture partner and a business advisor for several international venture capital firms. He spends his time creating awareness about digital assets and advising top token issuers. So, Mr. Ajit Khurana, I welcome you to deliver the talk.
Of different cultures, high human resource capacity, and world-class standards make the state an emerging knowledge hub. Future belongs to Kerala. Kerala provided an entrepreneurial roadmap with a startup policy, which was a first by an Indian state. Kerala Startup Mission took the stage as
we will be joining with Ajit Khurana very shortly. So meanwhile, please do watch our corporate video, which has been playing right now. Thank you.
Kerala, different cultures, high human resource capacity and world-class living standards make the state an emerging knowledge hub. Future belongs to Kerala. Kerala perfected its entrepreneurial roadmap with a startup policy, which was a first by an Indian state. Kerala Startup Mission took the center stage as nodal agency. Government support poured in for budding ventures with funding and market connect. The state now serves as a template for governments' geographies. Thus, Kerala became home to one of the most vibrant startup ecosystems in the world.
We started Gen Robotics from the college itself through the Kerala Startup Mission IDC cell. And when we came to Kerala Startup Mission through the IDC cell, we only had an idea. Now the company Gen Robotics is spanned across throughout India, and also we are in a verge of sending our solutions globally.
Kerala has a sophisticated and inclusive startup ecosystem. Sophisticated in terms of the funding, skilling, facilities, and other capabilities it offered to the startups. And these capabilities have gotten it ranked as one among the top states in our country.
Kerala draws students towards innovation and entrepreneurship right from school and college levels. Kerala Startup organizes IETs, inspire students and welcome them to the startup ecosystem.
Kerala Startup Mission organizes Singularity Global Impact Challenge and CIID for the global exposure for the startups.
Across the Kerala Startup Mission has 280 mini incubators and 40 plus incubation facilities.
The TimeEd and Kerala Startup Mission rolled out an excellent ecosystem for product development and clinical research. Everything had a smooth sail, so much so that I received 2 crore investment from Unicorn
Kerala Startup Mission also educates, providing better accelerator support, 24/7 plug-and-play desk and cabin space, business service office, cloud credits, and development tools to startups. The startup founders can easily access sector experts, mentors, and investors through Kerala Startup Mission. 18-month incubation program at IIT Kochi provides experience for startups. Kerala Startup Mission, equipped with state-of-the-art infrastructure, offers the best ecosystem where you transform your ideas into viable products with mentorship, market, industry connect, virtual incubation program, government connect, investor connect, access to loan, grant, other funds, and plug-and-play office space with world-class amenities. What else does a startup need to rock?
It's been really wonderful to be here, and of course, a wonderful tropical climate, food, and the coconuts. But it's been also very helpful to be part of the CUM ecosystem. You know, I came across a lot of helpful and talented people.
In our product development, KSCM supported us in terms of grant and seed loans. So that helped us in our journey. We could also visit a lot of foreign conferences and other international events, which helped us see the best in the world.
Kerala Startup Mission facilitates functioning of startups, furnishing what they need. Seed grant, venture capital, fund of funds, and research grant. In Kerala, startups are eligible for innovation grants worth rupees 30 lakh, seed funds as loan, help in patenting, R&D, and marketing support, equity funding through funds, to state and central government schemes.
Here, budding ventures are provided with facilities to innovation.
Kerala Startup Mission is accredited venture capital funds to corpus fund to emerging startups in the state. Kerala Startup Mission also facilitates external investments with a novel fund of funds scheme, alternative investment funds. A combined corpus of over 1,000 available through.
Recently, Startup Mission has unique to support startups in that area. Around 30 lakhs grant to the startups.
ISC allows startups to become a part of India government's Electronic System Design and Manufacturing ESDM scheme, collaborate with state-of-the-art technologies.
Aishwarya, hello.
Yes, yes.
So Ajit has joined.
Oh, all right, all right.
I mean, Ajit is here. Yeah, please.
Yeah, yeah. We have Mr. Ajit Khurana here. He is a notable figure in the cryptocurrency industry. He is a former head of the Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Committee, which as a part of the IAMAI is India's foremost industry body for cryptocurrency. Ajit is an author, entrepreneur, prolific angel investor, former CEO of Zeppe, former CEO of the business incubator Sign at IIT Bombay, and former advisor to Kalari Capital. He has raised venture capital, expanded businesses globally, developed low-cost customer acquisition strategies, and is a wizard at financial engineering. Presently, he is a venture partner and a business advisor for several international venture capital firms. He spends his time creating awareness about digital assets and advising top token issuers. Mr. Ajit Khurana, I welcome you. Over to you for the Power Talk.
Thank you very much, Aishwarya. That was a very generous introduction. Just to make sure I know what we are doing here, tell me how many minutes I have, and does that include the Q&A session?
So we do have Q&A side by side, so you can continue your session, which will be for 30 minutes, followed by which, if there are any Q&A, I will address it to you and you can answer them.
Very well. Thank you very much. So we are
Thank
talking
you.
about Web3 and seeing it in the context of startups. So to some extent, regardless of whether you have been a participant in the Web3 space, maybe as an investor, maybe as some stakeholder in the startup, or whether you are viewing this from outside, the fact is that this entire game at present is seeming a little like the 9 blind men and the elephant. We all have some idea about what Web3, crypto, blockchain, and all of these things mean. Words like decentralization, well, we have heard them often. In its literal sense, we probably even know what decentralization means. But the fact is that a lot of us do not understand the full implication of what's going on. And I cannot profess to change that completely in a 30-minute period. But I hope that over the next 10, 15, 20 minutes, you will understand what's going on here. So without trying to even get into what is blockchain and what is happening here, let's just directly jump to an application, which is Web3. So if Web 1 was all about having static websites and information dissemination websites, and Web 2 was about interactivity, which led to e-commerce and social media, Web 3 is about you, me, and everyone actually being an owner of the digital asset. So for example, an example of a Web 2 property would have been something like an Amazon, something like an Uber or Ola. Amazon allows you to buy, goods, retail goods online. So we call it e-commerce, while Uber and Ola are taxi hailing companies. What would the Web 3 version of Amazon look like? What would the Web 3 version of Uber look like? Well, if we consider that part of Amazon, where third-party sellers, maybe people such as you and me, can go and list our objects on Amazon and they potentially get purchased, then we ship them and have the payment processing. Imagine if all of those functions were actually performed by a platform or a startup and there was no Amazon, which means it was just software. Likewise, Uber or Ola involves us knowing the location of me, the rider, you, potentially the driver, matchmaking us based on where I'm going, and processing the payment, probably showing navigation along the way. A Web 3 version of this software startup would be where you remove the company entirely. There is no Uber, there is no Ola, and instead we have that software which is performing identical functions to matchmake the driver, the rider, processing the payment, navigating along the way. Now, why did both the examples I gave you have that one thing in common, that is you remove the owner? Well, that is what Web 3 is about. While I do not think that any Web3 startup, or for that matter, any Web3 asset such as Bitcoin, has achieved a true degree of decentralization, and hence its various shades of gray, not black and white at present, the fact is that Web3 is about heading in that direction. And we hope someday that truly we would have a situation where huge amounts of value is created, yet there is no owner or central authority. And if you feel that, hey, you know what, that sounds good in concept, but is that really going to happen? Well, there are precedents, aren't there? For example, every one of us uses email, right? Now, what is the software that governs email? Some of you may know that there is an underlying software called SMTP. The full form of that is Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. So Google or Gmail is built on top of that as an app which provides you an interface to the SMTP protocol. Likewise, Yahoo and a whole host of other email providers are nothing but your view or your user interface onto a software which now truly nobody owns, and hence in a sense everybody owns, right? So something similar could happen in Web3, and that is where the most exciting opportunities arise, and that is also where there is the least level of understanding about what is going on here. So now, where is the startup opportunity here? If I were truly to get a bunch of startups in a room today who are probably starting on their Web3 journey and ask them what encouraged you to start Web3, and let us assume that all of those startups are 100% not just honest, which I'm sure they will be, but also 100% frank, the fact is that a majority of them may have actually stated that, you know, if I'm a Web3 startup, I would find it easier to raise money because investors are far more willing to buy tokens than they are to buy equity into a startup. And not just are they far more willing, but they're far more willing to give higher valuations, whether it's 5 million, 20 million, so somewhere in the $5 million to $30 million range. Investors are investing at those valuations without too much of a hassle around it. And if you were to try to achieve something similar in selling startup equity, it would be significantly more difficult, right? So this probably would be one of the motivations for a startup entrepreneur. Not a good motivation, I must say, because it's a little like saying that if I went to an MBA program, my life is sorted. And then you go to an MBA program and find that your life is not sorted, because the life kind of starts after your program is over and you progress along your career in a good way. So I would say that the motivation of merely replacing your shares by something called tokens and largely running the startup in the same way, I personally think of it as a recipe for disaster. In the Q&A, some of you who understand this space well may turn around and give me one or more examples where some startups seem to have done that and they seem to be doing okay. And I am unhappy to share that your observation would be correct, because there are such exceptions, but those exceptions are short-lived and I don't see them as carrying forward. So if you are seeking startup opportunities or opportunities to have a startup in the Web3 space, or more excitingly, and you can ask me why I find this more excitingly, if you are a Web2 startup who now wants to become a Web3 startup by doing the same activity, I think that here are some thoughts to keep in mind, and these are very, very exciting. Number one, because we are talking about almost in all cases there being an underlying blockchain technology, which really is owned by no one and hence everyone, and that this concept of why it's owned by no one and yet everyone is actually a philosophical construct which I'm trying to stay away from. Otherwise, decentralization itself is a theme for a half an hour talk. But if you understand truly that what used to be brand, for example, when I had to give you the example of an e-commerce website, I chose to talk about Amazon. Maybe I could have said Flipkart, but there are like hundreds of others, right? In fact, every one of us must almost necessarily have purchased something from an e-commerce website other than the top one or two within the last 1 year also. And why is it that despite that being a fact, I decide to give you the example of Amazon? Because Amazon is a very strong brand. When I was a kid, if somebody told me to buy chocolate on my way home, I would not just probably buy a Cadbury chocolate, but I would have bought a dairy milk. That is the power of brand. In the Web3 world, of course, the concept of brand still exists because that is based on a very fundamental human trait. But what brand was to all organizations prior to Web3, in Web3, it has become community. So if one startup, let us say Matic, which is an Indian origin startup, it is today called Polygon. So if Matic has a substantial community, and in a moment I'll tell you what community means, but if Matic has a substantial community, then Matic is the winner. No wonder then in about the last 18 months, Matic has moved up from a valuation of roughly around $80 million, 80 million with an M, to about $30 billion, which is billion with a B. And such an extraordinary growth is, I don't know of these occurring outside of Web3. As in, have there been in the traditional startup space, and the term traditional startup itself is funny, right? Because startups are anything but traditional. But in the pre-Web3 startup space, have there been startups that went from something like a $80 million valuation to a $30 billion valuation in a matter of 1.5 years? I cannot think of even one example. Of course, I may be limited in my thinking, but I have been part of the journey, not part of causing the journey, but let's say being a spectator to seeing Matic's meteoric rise. How did that get possible? I think that amongst other things, it is this understanding that the whole world is your customer, that your community, which includes, of course, users have to necessarily be part of your community. But at the same time, there are other parts of your community. It is other blockchain projects, other Web3 projects, their users and communities and how they engage with you. because blockchain-based projects, Web3 projects are often built like, building blocks. As in, I may be a startup which does something. So I do, let us say, payments on the blockchain, but I'm built on top of a layer 2 technology, which scales a layer 1 technology. So by being a community member of the payment processor, I'm also a community member of the layer 2 scaling solution, and I'm also hence a community member of the layer 1 blockchain on which all of this is happening. So a community is a very, very interesting concept. And I would say that if you are a startup in the pre-Web3 world, probably what you need to have as part of your team is something related to some person related to technology. Like you could be one of the co-founders, could be a tech co-founder, or one way or the other having access to technology. And second, you need to have access to a marketing person. So maybe one of the co-founders could be a marketing head, customer acquisition head, growth hacker, something along those lines. I think that the equivalent of that in a Web3, there continues to be a need to have a tech person. That's unavoidable. Although I believe that the tech is in most cases relatively easier in Web3, unless you are building something at an infrastructure level where it may not be easy. But along with the tech person, unlike the marketing person I listed as the second co-founder, probably in a Web3 company, the second person or one of the top 2 people needs to be a community person. Because if you have everything and you can do Facebook ads and you can try to acquire customers by forcing downloads or incentivizing them by giving them discounts or pay per download, etc., you will achieve absolutely nothing as a startup in the Web3 space. But if you know how to run a good Telegram group, Discord group, if you know how to get engagement activated in the user group, I think that is where significant amount of growth in value as well as usage, adoption, partnership, etc. would occur in a Web3 startup. Let's look at the other part that I talked about and mentioned as being very exciting, namely a Web2 startup becoming a Web3 startup. Now, why would you do that? You would do that if you find yourself the founder of a Web2 startup saying things like, we have created such and such and such, whatever your such and such and such is, and we are going to take this forward driven by users. Users will get together and decide what it is that they want to see evolving or changing. And based on consensus or the majority of the users saying something, then the users themselves will decide how this moves forward. Right? I'll give you an example. Suppose you are a college and you have an entrepreneurship wing. This entrepreneurship wing could be e-cell, entrepreneurship cell, by whatever name, could be run by completely by the students, as opposed to there being a faculty person or a college admin person or somebody from the office, playing a significant oversight where students go and do absolutely everything. Or it could be very strongly governed by faculty in charge, and then the dean, trustee, principal, or whatever have you is playing a significant role in how this evolves and making calls on behalf of the e-cell, etc. I have seen this in literally dozens of colleges around the country. And if you look at the best entrepreneurship cells around India, they are necessarily of the first type, where the people who are part of the entrepreneurship cell decide office bearers amongst themselves, and they will go and run this entire thing called the entrepreneurship cell. Those that try to be controlled by a faculty in charge, or where permissions are required for the most minor things such as can we use this classroom, etc., those tend to achieve some purpose but not significantly. What I'm trying to get at is systems where users are also the drivers, are also the creators, are also those that are going to decide the fate of the system itself, if done well, tend to be the strongest systems, which is why democracy is supposed to be, with all its flaws, the best form of government, right? That's why we adopted it in India, and so is other countries. But removing some levels of abstraction, making it a little more tangible, this entire thing called Web3 is all about decentralization. Decentralization, for example, what could it mean? If the company, the startup, is a digital startup, which means its software runs on computers, and if the startup does not have any server of its own, that would be an example of decentralization. And some of you who have no exposure to Web3 will say, how can that be? We are using AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Computing Engine or whatever it is that you're using. And you're like, of course we have to run our web servers. As in, how would this work without that? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. You could have created a governance and incentive system for your community to set up their own nodes or own servers to contribute to the network and thereby power it, such that at a certain point you would not need to have even a single server of your own. And if that seems utopian, let me tell you that hundreds of Web3 projects, I hope the real number is thousands, but I can't vouch for that. But I can vouch for the fact that hundreds of Web3 startups have reached that stage already. Since I don't think any one of them is on the call right now, I will take a little more cliched example of Bitcoin. There is no company called Bitcoin. There is no organization. There is no customer support desk. There is no, nobody going to help you, give you tech support in that. Yet, trillions of dollars of value gets transferred on the Bitcoin network, pretty much comparable with what you would transfer on PayPal or Western Union or MoneyGram or the Visa network or the MasterCard network, etc. That is the level of value that is being, that is the order of magnitude of value that is being transferred on the Bitcoin network. But unlike all the others that I listed, which are hundreds, thousands of tens of thousands of employees, lots of physical locations, huge infrastructure, server, etc. costs in Bitcoin, well, the participants, the users, the community itself is bringing in that resource. So what drives this? Like I have already mentioned, but let me repeat, it is a system of governance and incentive. If you have created the right system of governance and incentive, you have a successful Web3 startup. What does this mean? Well, there is the concept of tokenomics. Let me just not digress from topic to topic. Let me come back to governance and incentives and then talk about tokenomics. If you are going to have a decentralized system, or let's reverse that. Let's look at a centralized system. So you are set up as a private limited company in India, and that is how the venture is officially structured. Well, who runs the company? There's going to be certain administrators such as the CEO, CMO, whatever, CXO. And then there's going to be an oversight by something called the board of directors. So the governance is provided by the board of directors and the executive is headed by the CEO or other such officials. In startups, of course, it could be that the founders are the CXOs as well as the board of directors, which is fine. But that is a system of governance. What is the system of incentives? The system of incentives is that these directors, these executives potentially own some part of ownership of the startup, and maybe some others, maybe in the marketing department or sales department, have stock options or some sort of a commission system which is related directly to the performance of the company. And even others who may not have stock options or have some sort of commission or bonus structure, the fact that they have continued employment into the startup is their incentive system. So that is the governance and incentive system of a usual organization, startup or otherwise. The largest organizations in the country also, even if they are not a private limited company, at a very high level actually have this structure of governance and this system of incentives to incentivize the employees and the participants who run the company to do a good job. In a Web3 startup, maybe things start in a similar way, although a lot of them may not be structured as private limited companies or companies to begin with, but you become Web3 only when all the users, all the members of the community, even if they are not users, together have the power, the ultimate power, not the power to suggest what to do, because a lot of organizations can ask for suggestions, but actually to implement the change. Please note, when I say implement the change, I don't just mean make decisions, which is the first step of implementation, but actually cause the implementation to happen. That would be an example of a perfect governance system. Very few Web3 startups also have achieved that. Decision making, a lot have achieved, but execution at a decentralized phase, well, some have. I think the topmost Web3 projects have already reached that stage. So if you've heard of names like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, Solana, blah, 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 a lot of those have actually achieved that. But if you look at those hundreds of thousands that I referred to, they may have achieved only the community deciding what is the decision maker. The community is the decision maker and not the executor. But mere governance in the absence of incentives will create a very strange system where we have to depend upon the genuine goodness of the participants in the system. And that is unlikely to be sustainable. Maybe in your family, you can have a system where, that people participate in a family setup or a small community setup in a selfless way. But to hope that a large organization or a startup would be created by the selfless contribution of governance or of the community is not realistic. So the system of incentives will come either in one of two fashions. Either I'll say everybody in my community who is contributing to my startup will share the wealth or value, the economic value that is being created by the system. So for example, if you have heard, and if you have not heard, still try to understand it in the sense I'm explaining it. If you have heard of terms like proof of work, proof of stake, etc., a large number of proof of stake driven Web3 startups actually do have the participants who own the token that powers that startup stake their tokens and provide authentication to the rest of the startup or to the rest of the network, leading then to everybody. Suppose there's a transaction fee being captured by the Web3 startup, it is shared by everybody who owns the token related to that startup. Likewise, a proof of work does something similar. Example would be that of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the like, wherein everybody who contributes their resource, their hardware, their software, their time, their electricity to the network runs the chance of getting the opportunity to earn some Bitcoin out of it or some Ethereum out of it or what have you, right? To remove now, as I move to the last 5 minutes of the conversation, if you look at why India became the software services hub of the world, why there are organizations in India like Wipro, Infosys, TCS, and a couple of others, which actually employ lakhs of employees. I mean, they're huge, right? They're comparable to like Indian Railways and organizations with such large number of employees. The reason is quite obvious. We are a country which has English speaking people, because English is one of the major languages around the world. We as a society value education a lot. So, even more than the economic status of a family, the same family will go and try to get their sons and daughters educated. And finally, we have a fair degree of mobility when it comes to economic opportunity, right? Since like more than 50 years ago, we had like people in our parents or grandparents generation who were busy going to Africa to make a living. Then came the decades of people going to the Middle East, whether it's Saudi or Dubai or Oman or Yemen or wherever. And even today, as of the last 2-3 decades, people going to America, Canada, England, Australia, etc., to make a living. So we have certain amount of mobility that we culturally show. Coincidentally, the Chinese also value education a lot. The Chinese are probably even more mobile than Indian, but they did not have that first thing that I listed, namely a very large proportion of the English-speaking population, right? So that is where we moved ahead. I think that if you buy into some of the oversimplified reasons I'm giving you of why India became a information technology services superpower, then we should definitely become a Web3 superpower, because we require the same things. In addition, we need a workforce which is technically quite qualified. As in India, everybody is an engineer. As in, there are so many engineering colleges over the last, I would say, 30 years that have sprung up, that today it is more than 30 years ago. If you wanted to get into an engineering college, any engineering college, it was a feat. I mean, it was very difficult. I'm talking of like probably in the 80s. Then in the 90s, like engineering colleges mushroomed all over the country, and while there were ups and downs along the 30-year path from 1990 up to today, but largely we have a very large technical force. So India can be and should be a Web3 superpower. The good thing is, again, speaking from the startups point of view, the good thing is that you as startups, when you try to go and raise investors' money, you will always think that, what, had I been in Silicon Valley, I would be able to raise more money, I would be able to raise money easily, and I would be able to raise money at a higher valuation. The good news is that in the Web3 world, the valuation and the ease of fundraise and the quantity of fundraise that people in Silicon Valley or other such prominent locations of the world are encountering, even Indian startups are encountering the same. So it's a truly global platform, which we did not see prior to Web3. Like for example, I remember all the way from 2010 up to about 2016, 17, a typical Indian startup who was going in for angel investment, having achieved a certain level of traction, potentially even some early revenues, would be valued by angel investors at about $1 million of valuation. So this will be somewhere between the 5 to 10 crore rupee range. Now, what happens is if your valuation is that, your fundraise is a part of that, right? So if you have a valuation of 5 to 10 crore rupees, your fundraise is probably between 50 lakhs to 300 lakh rupees. That is 50 lakhs to 3 crore rupees. And even this is not very easy to get. I'm referring to what happened until the recent past, not in the last 2-3 years where things have changed substantially. But the problem with this is that there is only a little that you can do with a 50 lakh or a 3 crore, especially if you're a very rapidly growing startup. And once you burn that money, the expectation is that you will raise the next round of funds. If that happens, congratulations, you're on your way. And we have created some of the very, very fine startups in this country. However, what also happens equally is that you do well, you burn the money, and then the next round is not forthcoming. And because you raised only a small amount of money, you obviously could achieve only a small amount of growth with it, because you have to hire people, you have to get an office, you have to scale things up, you have to do experiments by spending money on advertising, etc. And then it all gets over. And then there's nobody to fund you, right? So this was the valley of death, as I used to label it when I was a very active angel investor, that, you know, startup does well, and then it raises some money, and now it needs to raise money at a much higher scale. But in between, there is potentially a valley of death, which means once they reach here and they don't rapidly raise their next round, which is a substantially higher round, running the round size itself being something like a 5 to 25 crore, that is loosely you could say $1 million to 4 million kind of round, because they have already achieved something. If they don't raise that round rapidly, they either die or they start becoming very conservative. And often this conservatism leads to a slow death, especially because of the way the startup economics work, where a lot of them are not profitable for the longest time. In Web3, I'm noticing something quite different. I'm noticing that startups almost add, as in this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but not too much, almost at the pitch deck stage are raising a few $1 million at obviously many $1 million of valuation, and investors are supporting it. As a result, even if they make some mistakes, they burn some money, the experiments do not work out, they still have the ability to move ahead and potentially succeed. This is very attractive to startup founders. A lot of founders who are even in startups that don't seem to lend itself well to the Web3 paradigm, or I shouldn't say well, that don't seem to lend itself easily to a Web3 paradigm, even those are trying to become Web3 startups merely because of the support of the ecosystem as well as the investor support that is available, right? So with that, I invite all of you, those who may not know much about Web3, to find out more about Web3. You know, given that in this union budget, our finance minister Nirmala Sitharaman talked about some tax provisions, then suddenly you will hear somebody from the Reserve Bank of India come and talk about cryptocurrency, and then you yourself may have some opinion about these things. It is difficult to be completely open-minded about something that requires a paradigm shift in your thinking. And while I'm not going to tell any one of you that Web3 is good, or crypto is good, or Bitcoin is good, or any of the generic statements, but I would still encourage all of you to approach this with an open mind, and there might just be some extraordinary opportunities that are available. Thank you very much for having me here. You know, when I signed up for this, I didn't realize it was a Sunday, and I didn't realize it's morning. Many of you may not know I'm not located in India. So for me, it is much earlier in the morning than it is for you right now. And about 20 minutes before this session started, I was actually asleep. So thank you very much for having me here. My voice is still not my morning voice yet. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ajit, for joining, despite the fact that it has been like really early for you there. We do not have any questions. So what I'd like to say is that thank you so much for making us understand the concept of Web 3.0 with very relatable examples. And I'm sure the audience has also enjoyed, and let's together make India the superpower of Web 3. So thank you so much for joining in today.
Thank you for having me. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Before we break for lunch, we have just one more session, which is going to be a tech talk titled Enterprise Blockchain Adoption Guiding Principles, Chainyard's Experiences and Lessons Learned in Building Large Consortiums, such as Trust Your Supplier by Jijo Joseph, Vice President, Chainyard Blockchain Services. Mr. Jijo is a global senior IT executive with 25 years of delivering growth in information technology services across the US, India, and the Middle East with hands-on technical experience. With a strong background in strategizing, pre-sales, prospecting, pricing, architecting, building, Q&A, customer support, designing user experience journey map, customer-centric digital marketing, engineering and business process consulting, and associated operating models, he has an aim to develop new revenue streams and reducing cost. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Jijo Joseph. Over to you, Mr. Jijo.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all, your brain is getting smoked with all the talks you're having. So I don't want to take so much time. I think we have 30 minutes, right?
That's right.
Okay, so let me pull in a presentation. Get the center presentation mode. All right, so I will I'll very quickly walk you through the Chainyard's one of the product in Chainyard is called Trust Your Supplier, and over by Chainyard. So we have been in with this product for the last 3 years. I'll walk you through some of the budding entrepreneurs down here. If you are trying to enter into the world of developing a blockchain solution, like it's more like a Web3, like Ajit was talking now. If you wanted to, how much decentralization you can bring in any of the approaches we have to take it for that, right? Especially when it comes to the enterprise side. You can hear me well, right?
So, yes, you are.
Yeah, so I will talk one or two slides about Chainyard, then we'll come to the TY solution, and I'll bring in these lessons learned, in between a few slides. So Chainyard has been, it's a 21-year-old company. So we started our blockchain journey. We are based out of North Carolina, US. So we started our blockchain journey 5 years back when IBM started the, Linux Foundation and IBM and all started the Hyperledger Fabric. So we were one of the early members who joined, and we were doing the QA of the Fabric as early as 2016. So over the period, we developed probably more than 40 blockchain solutions, more than 40 to 50 blockchain solutions for our clients. One of the solutions we created by ourselves is called Trust Your Supplier. That's what I am going to talk today. I'll skip this slide. So just summarize the Chainyard in one slide. Like if you look at the recent Everest Enterprise Blockchain Services peak metrics, where they assess all the players in this area. So you'll find Chainyard here as one of the very close to the leaders bucket. Like we are a major contender. So other major contenders are like Capgemini, PwC, Deloitte, UIC. So Chainyard being a very small company, we are like a 250 employees company, but we focus on blockchain with a niche focus on blockchain. That's one reason we made it here. I mean, if you look at all other people are big fives as well as the billion-dollar guys. So when we started our journey in 2015 with blockchain as a services, and somewhere in the 18, we thought about creating a solution by ourselves. So we picked the area of buyers and sellers marketplace, primarily focusing on the procurement. So if anybody is into procurement, excuse me, you see that procuring a supplier into buyers relationship or buyers entity is a long process. You have a discovery happening, basically searching for a supplier. This is from the buyer's perspective. There's a discovery happening, finding a supplier. Then there's a qualification happening. Like you qualify, you have thousands of suppliers in the market. You qualify, bring the 100, and you send an invite to them. So they started responding. Then you validating all the responses. Then you onboard them to your existing ERP. Then the life cycle management happens. An example, let's say 6 months down the line, the supplier's insurance may expire. You need to renew the insurance, bring them over. So it's a painful process goes through. And if you look from the supplier's point of view, this is one supplier. Let's say the buyer one invites a supplier. So he asks the buyer one asks supplier like 50 questions, like your financial statements, your bank statements, your board member information, your trade license, and it keeps going. The insurances, you can ask whatever you want. So I think so supplier submit all this information to buyer. Buyer send it to validators for validating. Then this, from the supplier's perspective, like the process repeats, right? For buyer 2, he does the same thing. Maybe 5 questions are different out of the cost 50. And buyer 3, the whole thing continues, right? I mean, for buyer 3, he submits again. And when he submits to buyer 3, some of the information may be different. But buyer 1 do not know that those informations are changed, right? So we thought there's a good opportunity for creating a trusted source of a supplier, basically KYC or supplier identity in a blockchain that can be cross-utilized across all the buyers. That will reduce the cost and mitigate the risk, right? And create a trust and shorten the life cycle. So when we decided, but this was the first learning, when we decided about doing that, we are a technology company, right? Our expertise in the procurement was limited at that time. Then we thought someone who is actually very solid in the procurement, we should partner with someone who can take the product to market. So we went to IBM procurement. We spoke to this CPO, Chief Procurement Officer, IBM, Bob Murphy. So we partnered with them. So on a revenue sharing model. So IBM brought in all the procurement expertise. They did the initial sales. They gave us the IBM blockchain support, and China brought in all the blockchain development, solution implementation, and the consulting and all the engagement aspects of there. So that's why we took it to the market, right? So that's the first lesson for you if you are looking at, if you are a technology company, make sure you have someone to do the go-to-market. Make sure you bring in an industry leader to start with. Majority, that's where a lot of the companies make mistake. They start because most of the people in the technology, they are coders. They just start writing the code the day one. We never wrote a code on the day one. So we made sure that we have someone with us. So the coding started much late in the game, actually. So the second thing before the coding we did was, we did a study on the supplier data hierarchy. So we are talking about suppliers' data being shared across multiple buyers, right? So in that case, we should make sure the supplier data is common, right? So we should be able to standardize the onboarding process. We should be able to standardize supplier data. So we found that 50% of supplier data is common across all buyers. Like these are like financial statement, the trade licenses, the insurance policies, board member information, all kinds of things, right? Then we found another 20 to 25% is same across industry. So if there are 2 companies, 2 buyers, they're the same industry, they both are the telecom, 75% of the data is common. They asked. If they are the same geography, another 10 to 15% is common, right? So we found that buyer specific data could be as less as 5% or 25%, and it depends on where these buyers fall across, right? So this gives us the confidence saying that, okay, we can standardize the onboarding process. We can make the questions same across everybody, and we can get the answers, validated answers, cross-utilized, right? So next thing we did is like, okay, we did a study on saying that, do we need a blockchain or can we go with a centralized database, right? I mean, blockchain brings in a lot of advantages, but a lot of disadvantages, right? The solution has scalability issues, especially on the enterprise side. The solution has performance problems. Solution is deployment is difficult. You need so much nodes needs to be there, but do we actually need a blockchain? All right. So we found that yes, definitely we need a blockchain to provide a trusted system so that the buyers, suppliers, they have the confidence on the confidentiality, privacy aspect of system. We definitely need a blockchain solution. So that's the second learning for you is to make sure blockchain is the right solution for you. I mean, don't put a blockchain, don't put DeFi, don't put a tokens, don't put all those things just because of you get initial quick funding, and just because of you think that is the way the industry is going, right? Because because your solution requires blockchain. So the next thing we did is we put together an MVP. So what we did is we went with just 4 or 5, I think, handful of buyers in the world. So we put them together and we created an MVP. So the way the work is, and I'll take the slide to explain how it works. Let's say the supplier is onboarded by one buyer, right? So the buyer will send all the questionnaires to the supplier on a blockchain network. The supplier submits all the answers to the blockchain network, and the buyer will send it to, let's say, verifier or validators to validate all the data. The validation comes to the same blockchain network. So the first onboarding takes same amount of time as it was taken before. But as the network grows, let's say buyer 2 comes, the buyer 2 invite the supplier, and buyer 2 sends all these questions. In that case, supplier finds that of the 50 questions the buyer 2 asked, 45 or 40 were already been sent it same as the buyer 1, and it's been validated by verifier. So all you need to fill in is another 10 questions, and just right mouse click or share all the pre-validated answers to buyer 2. As you can see, when the network grows, like buyer 10, buyer 20 comes, like onboarding becomes way easier because 99% of the data is already pre-validated with the previous buyers. And the way we created this network is we created an opportunity for third-party developers. They can come and use our network. They can create applications on top of our network. So we are becoming a blockchain of blockchain app factory where people can install their own app. As an example, third-party can come and install an app called and find a supplier or find a buyer from meeting this requirement, and the list goes on, right? So that's the lesson 3. We have limit the number of members in the early team. Like I have found like systems where the initial team members, like 50 people joined a consortium, and when one guy proposes something, the other 40 things that's not good for them. So there is always a lack of convergence, like consensus as well. So you limit the number of people in the early consortium or in the ecosystem to a handful of people. So you can actually have a closed room discussion and come up with MVP. So the second is develop the MVP to provide an immediate business value to all stakeholders. I'll come to that business value in the next slide, but make sure that everyone benefit the ecosystem. If you have players coming to the ecosystem with no direct benefit, they are never going to subscribe to the system, right? So you need to have third parties benefiting, validators are benefiting, buyers are benefiting, suppliers are benefiting, and everybody is benefiting the system. So that benefit is what coming is you'll see that buyers from the network we found that buyers get 90% of the real-time updates. As an example, let's say buyers once onboarded all suppliers. Let's say tomorrow supplier changes his trade license. In the past, the supplier who has to go and update everybody, and everyone goes and verifies it. Today, there's only one update happens, and all smart contract will update everyone. The end, not to save the time, I'll quickly go through. At the end, we see that 50% reduction in cost to buyers, and similarly 50% cost of reduction to all the suppliers we find. And suppliers, most important aspect is not the cost only, 70 to 90% reduction in cycle time. Today, suppliers was taking 90 days to onboard. That comes to even 5 to 10 days or 2 to 5 days or whatever. So he gets an accelerated revenue upfront. So this is the value proposition for the end-to-end. Supplier benefits we found, buyers benefit, auditors benefit, verifiers benefit. As an example, if I verify someone's data today and it's verified on the blockchain, I own that verification. Tomorrow, when a supplier shares it to a new buyer, a smart contract will automatically pay me for the IP I created. So I don't need to go and re-verify every time. Okay. So business and governance model. So the way this is again one very interesting aspect to everybody. So trust is an issue in blockchain. I mean, we say that blockchain brings in trust. Blockchain brings in trust depends on who actually input the data into the blockchain, right? So if you have a blockchain where junk is being put there, you get only junk out of it. Only thing is that the data is not changed. So what we did is we created a governance board. We created a governance board with one company majors in each of the industries. As an example, like technology, we have Cisco and IBM. On the financials, we have JP Morgan, American Express. On the oil and gas, we have Saudi Aramco, BHP, Lenovo. I mean, there's a large set of. I mean, this probably slide is a bit older. Probably, I think we have a much larger network right now. And there's a large set of validators. Again, there's the validators leading from run-on broadsheet to rapid rating. What is this environment validation? Rapid rating provides a risk assessment of the companies. I think again these validators list is much bigger. So this is slightly different from what we do today in traditional network, right? We run, create, and manage like Ajit was saying, right? So instead of the centralized, we have a decentralized autonomous organization. Yeah, not completely decentralized autonomous, but we are decentralized. The policies are governed by the governance board. The governance board decides, how to proceed, what should be the how to onboard a member, how to remove a member, or any issues happens out of it. So it comes out of the decentralization. Again, like I said, there are third-party business networks. They come and create applications on top of this network. The people like TradeShift can run a trade finance on top of this. It's again because of the decentralized nature of the network. I'll skip the governance additional slide. So when we created the governance model, we created in such a way that there's roles and responsibility for every governance member. And because of the governance member provide these services, they get additional benefit. So those are the next learning, establish a strong business model to accelerate the stakeholder buying. So what we did, so we went through multiple different business models. Like we went through starting with the buyer is free and supplies are charged, and later we changing to buyers pay and supplies are free. So very very dynamic business model we changed in to make sure that we can accelerate the onboarding process. Again, it went through the business governance board and took their approvals to proceed. The decentralized governance board help us to win the deals. Like when people say such a large consortium and especially such a number of members in the governance team, it's much easier for winning new buyers and suppliers. So again, the onboarding ecosystem, we use the ecosystem partners to onboard the suppliers. So the way we do is like we onboard the buyer, and the buyer goes and onboard the suppliers. Again, this is a mistake a lot of startup I see doing. Like they go cherry picking, try to onboard suppliers directly, then go and tell the buyer saying that I have this many number of suppliers in network. Why don't you onboard, right? No, we did it differently. We went to the buyers. We saying that I will onboard you because of the we standardize the onboarding process for you. We onboard you. You go and onboard all the suppliers on behalf of us, right? And again, don't underestimate security requirements. When people, this is the first question I always get on every time I present. How security is mandated, because people think enterprise blockchain is very similar to public blockchain, but actually they are two different things. Enterprise blockchain has it's a private permission network, and Trust Your Supplier today has undergone GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, SOX, PCI DSS attestations, and SOC 1, SOC 2, Type 1 and Type 2 certifications of the company, and went through all those things. So we separate out the PIA and financials, ownership contracts. So I mean, people are not allowed to see everything. Like I say, buyer one can see supplier one's data only if supplier one has joined the buyer one network. And well, without the permission of the supplier, other buyers cannot see anything other than the basic data. So that data hierarchy privacy, security, and hierarchy, data hierarchy is being properly maintained in the system. And this is something when you start developing, that's something, especially on the enterprise side, you need to start looking from the day one onwards. So again, the learning your go-to-market strategy to incentivize everyone, like everyone should get paid. Being in the network, we are kind of very similar to MVP we discussed. Don't underestimate the legal challenges of getting all the contracts. It took us more than a year, or sometimes more than a year and a half, to get the initial contracts being put together, because these are new business model, right? Who should pay who and how they should get paid. How do you understand the smart contracts are not changed when you upgrade the network. Like all the consortium building governance model issues came up in the initial days. Actually, it helped us to create a consulting practice under consortium and governance model. And the security considerations, the slide I mentioned, because starting from GDPR, California security policies, HIPAA, or the SOX 1, SOX compliances, and all those aspects. Again, the growth has been tremendous. We are now in 70 countries, tens of thousands of suppliers onboarded, and the buyers we crossed more than, and the commitment side we have crossed more than, I think 3 dozen Fortune 200 companies. On the, I think, onboarding side, I think buyer 22 or something has onboarded. I think a lot of these buyers are more than 20,000, 10,000, those kinds of suppliers. So 20 buyers means you are talking about, when everybody is on board, you're talking about like 200,000 plus suppliers. Okay. But the important thing I want to tell you is, like, we started with supplier information management as a blockchain, but the way it is evolved, it actually evolved into a trust and risk compliance system. Like that's why all the buyers wanted to call it as. All the buyers could look at, I had all of my identity risk assessment, like diversity, inclusion there, anti-bribery there, banking there, financial health. All these are validated by a set of validators in the network. And they see all the buyers see that at one single point. They get all the information, all the buyers, all the suppliers actually. So this is the way it got evolved to, and it got evolved into a TVS marketplace. It's a marketplace very similar to Amazon marketplace, where you have all the buyers and suppliers in one particular network. That's a magnificent growth. I mean, as an example, so, and it leads to creation of new services on top of this network every other day actually. I mean, there's an example in the case of COVID last year, when in the US there was a shortage of buying PPE equipment. IBM and China, we quickly put together a rapid supplier connect on leveraging the Trust Your Supply network. So we had the Trust Your Supply network with a verified, validated identity of suppliers, and there was buyers looking for the PPE, and we had the IBM other ERP solutions which was providing the availability of this equipment. So we were very quickly able to interconnect these two and provide such services to the network. So that's the last one. Be agile to develop features and grab new economy, because probably you start with something and you will end up with a much larger, much bigger thing. And you should be agile to change your plan and how the network takes you. I think that's all I have. I'll wait for if you have further questions. Otherwise, thank you very much. I appreciate being here. And thanks for the opportunity given to me.
Thank you so much for joining with us today. And it was a really good insight that you I think. Yeah, thank you so much for joining today with us.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. So now let's take a break for lunch, and we can come back at 2:30 p.m. In the second half of the day, we will witness the Tech Talk on Startup Ramp program by AWS, Public Sector and Green Innovation Fund Demo Day. So the second half of the day will commence at 2:30 p.m. So let's join back after a quick lunch. Thank you.